Hello, and welcome to the start of a remarkable story. In fact, the word remarkable is hardly adequate. It's almost impossible to reach for a description to describe the scale of the information that you're going to see and hear in the next 4 hours or so. Imagine, for instance, that despite what we're led to believe, there is no such thing as a random accident, a random incident, a random anything. That everything happens because it is meant to happen. On a spiritual level, how we create our own reality, and what we blame other people for, we're actually creating. And in the second part of this video, we're going to look in detail at how that happens, because now, as the veil lifts in the last few years of the 20th century and we move into the 21st, we're now scientifically being able to confirm that these things are true. And then there's another level of what you're going to hear in the next 4 hours, which I'm going to really start with. And that's another version of there's no such thing as a random accident or a random incident. It's a story that reveals that not just now, not just in the modern world, but back thousands and thousands of years, a tiny, tiny few people, indeed interbreeding genetic bloodlines, have controlled, entered the positions of power and have orchestrated what we call history. So that wherever you look, increasingly as we've created the technology to become a global society, increasingly this tiny little clique, the tribe or the brotherhood as I call them, have been able to orchestrate the major events and therefore the direction of the world on a global scale, and a scale that beggars belief. What I've already said is staggering to the perception of life that most people have, that we're encouraged to have, that we are programmed to have. And I feel a bit like the cow who walks in the field, and you've got the herd of cows in the field there, and they're munching away, and their reality is that every now and again the big truck comes and it takes a few of them away, and wherever they think they go, I don't know, another field, on holiday, whatever. And then this other cow comes into the field and says, hey, you got to listen, or you won't believe what I've just found out. You know when they put those cows and some of us in that truck and they take us away every now and again, they're not taking us to another field or on vacation. What they do is they take you down to this big building, and they slit their throats and they bleed them dry, and then they cut them up and they hang them on hooks, and then they put them in little packages and put it in the supermarket. And then them humans come along and buy us and eat us. What would be the reaction of the rest of the herd on hearing this information? You're crazy, man. You're out of your brain. You want to go and see a psychiatrist? They'd never do that. This is ridiculous. And anyway, I've got shares in that trucking company and I get a good return. Shut up, you're making waves. And yet, all the things that I have just said are absolutely true. It's just that the herd will not believe them. And what's happening now as we unfold across the millennium and beyond, and the perception of life dramatically changes. What in the past would have been considered ridiculous, extreme, and nonsense is increasingly, through documented evidence, not from some theory, being confirmed as true. A very, very few people run this planet and control your life, and yet you have the power to control your life. You just give it away. And that's the point. When I talk about a few people running the world, understandably people come back and they say, well, it's not possible, mate. Can't be done. Too many people. And it can't be done by physical means, by soldiers at the door and soldiers in the street. You can do that in a small area, but you cannot control billions of people physically, just like you can't control a herd of sheep or a herd of pigs physically if they don't want to be controlled. In England, a little while ago, we had a remarkable example of that, in the sense that 2 pigs actually escaped from a slaughterhouse. They were just about to go through all that stuff I've just been talking about, and they got away. What they said was, instead of just following the herd and just accepting that that's what you do, they thought for themselves. They expressed their uniqueness. They broke out of the herd, and they ran away. And this became a major national news story day after day after day, because all these different people and agencies were dispatched to catch the 2 pigs, and they couldn't catch them for days and days and days, because they were trying to catch them physically. And because those pigs expressed their uniqueness, far from going to the slaughterhouse, they became national celebrities and are now wheeled out at galas and fetes and other events as one of the star attractions. Shows what you can do when you express your uniqueness instead of following the herd. The point I'm making here, however, is that you can't control lots of people physically, but you don't have to. What you do is you manipulate the way they think and the way they feel so they behave in the way you want them to. Mind and emotional manipulation. Summed up and symbolized by this. We are multidimensional infinity. We're not just a physical body. As we'll come to in the second of these 2 videos, we are everything that exists. But how much of everything that exists, the eternal consciousness, are we accessing? Infinity, or just a fraction? And the difference between that infinity perception of life and possibility and that is simply, again, beyond words to describe. So the idea has been, over thousands of years of this manipulation, to turn unique aspects of infinity into a tiny, tiny eggshell of consciousness with a tiny, tiny perception of its own potential to control its own destiny. And once you do that, you create the herd mentality. And the herd mentality can be summed up by what we see all the time in a herd or a flock, whatever you want to call it, of sheep. If you look at how sheep are controlled all over the planet every day, it's through this. It's because sheep are put in that symbolic eggshell so that they don't think for themselves, they just follow the one in front. So, most of the sheep every day, and I've seen it, remarkable sight it is, where the farmer arrives with the sheepdog, and there's this whole kind of group of sheep, hundreds of them in the example that I saw once in England. And they're all munching away and no problem. And then suddenly, when the farmer arrives, 1 or 2 of them start to walk. Just 1 or 2. Ba, 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 ba. And it's like flipping Exodus. Hundreds of them just follow the one in front without thinking. No, well, do I want to follow the one in front? You know, what do I feel today? Maybe I want to go over there. No, no, ba, 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 ba. And then you've got the tiny few who don't immediately succumb to that and follow that and concede their uniqueness to that, and they're given the extra dose of fear by the sheepdog. Row, row, row. Oh, all right then. And that 4-letter word, fear, is what controls the world. Fear, fear, the manipulation of fear. So what you have are 2 states of being that get hundreds of sheep exactly where the farmer and the sheepdog want every day. And those 2 states of being are ba, 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 and fear, which gets the few to do the same. Staggeringly, we may find watching a group of sheep like that funny. Oh, come on, Ethel, come and look at these sheep. They're so stupid. And yet, the human herd, because that's what we've become, has out-sheeped the sheep. Because we have actually dispensed with the sheepdog. We police each other. It has become a crime to be different. Anyone who's different from the norm gets ridicule or condemnation. Instead of expressing and welcoming and encouraging and glorying in the unique contributions we all have to make, we condemn them or ridicule them. Now this is not just navel contemplating, it is fundamental to how a few have controlled the world for literally thousands of years. It is fundamental to how a few have controlled the world for literally thousands of years. And unless we break this, they'll go on doing it. What it means is that all you have to do to control the direction of the world and control literally billions of people is to set the norms in society. What is considered right and wrong, moral or immoral, sane or insane, possible or impossible. And once you set those norms by controlling the education system, crikey, education system, crikey, what a word. Someone said, was Gandhi was asked what he thought of Western civilization, and he said, I think it would be a very good idea. What do I think of education? I think it would be a very good idea. I think it's about time we had some. So through controlling the education system, the mantra messages through the media, confirming that these norms are how life is, the vast majority of people in the human herd, from cradle to grave, occupy those norms and live their lives within them because they think that's reality. Now that's fine, that's a choice, I don't have a problem with that. But we seem to find it so hard to make those choices and let other people make different choices. So the reason the few can control the world as they do and have for so long is not just that vast numbers of people live within the norms, it's that those people insist those people that want to live outside the norms conform as well. So the key state of being, which is the foundation of all that I'm talking about, is the one you'll find in the vast, overwhelming majority, all but a handful, literally, of human beings. It's the fear of what other people think of them. Once you're in that mode, and that's the eggshell, then you're in trouble. Because suddenly you're not living your life, you're not expressing your uniqueness, you're living someone else's version of what you should be. You're already in prison, you're in what I call the hassle-free zone of norms. You've conceded what you are to what someone says you should be. And if enough people do that, and we do, whoever sets the norms runs the world. And what happens then, of course, is that when you're on the edge of that hassle-free zone and you're thinking, shall I, shan't I express my uniqueness? Shall I go with what my heart's telling me? What is the fear at that point that is making us resist? Oh, should I, shouldn't I? We're not at that point thinking, what will the President of the United States think if I express my uniqueness? What will the Pope think? Although some people will do that, my goodness me, why I don't know, but they do. Or what will the Governor of the Bank of England or the head of the Federal Reserve think? No, no. What's making us resist expressing our uniqueness is our fear of what our mother will think. Oh my God, what will my mother say? What will the guys down the bar say, or the people at work? In other words, the people's reaction that keeps us in those norms are the people who are already in there. So the sheep have also become the sheepdog. The police have also become the police. The inmates of the prison are also the prison warders. Now this combination, I repeat because it is so important, this combination means that whoever sets the norms in society runs the world. If, and the big, big if we concede our uniqueness to it and insist that everyone else does the same. And then when the norms are set, different aspects of the herd are played off against each other. So religions have been created, and we'll get into that because it's remarkable how the religions which fight each other and conflict with each other actually come down to the same people. Same story too when you look into it. So they play different aspects of the herd off against each other. Religion is played off against religion. Political party is played against political party. Economic theory against economic theory. And so we've set the norms that have created the herd, and then the herd is set at war with itself. And while we're cussing each other and fighting each other and blaming each other, the few people are string pulling all these different elements and creating the key element that's necessary for the few to control the many, divide and rule. So when I'm going through this story, I'm not kind of getting into, and I don't want to get into, it's them. What I'm talking about here is because of us. Without us, none of this stuff will be possible, which is great news because we can uncreate it in the period we're going through now. Just say one other thing before I move on about this. You know, most of the things, most of the belief systems, because that's what it is, belief, that are played off against each other, that conflict with each other and fight with each other, they're actually just the same state of being with a different name. I wonder what the difference is between, say, a Christian family that insists that their children believe what they believe and a Jewish family that insists their children believe what they believe. What's the difference? It's just that they believe slightly different things, and they are slightly, but they're still indoctrinating their children into a belief instead of saying, you have all the information available and we encourage it, and whatever you come up with, whatever you make of that information, I'm at peace with because you're unique and I'm not going to tell you what to think. So if we want to be free, we have to start by setting ourselves free and setting other people free, not least our children to be who they really are and not what we'd like them to be. And what I call these opposites that are not opposites, I call them opposames. And it's amazing when you look around the different groups that are fighting and conflicting, when you look at the core of what they're saying and they believe and their actions and their ways of acting, you're not looking at opposites at all. You're looking at the same state of mind with a different dress on. I'll give you a quick example. During the last war, the World War, Second World War, the far left, as symbolized by Joseph Stalin, communism, was played off against the opposite. The far right, symbolized by Adolf Hitler, the Nazis. Now, they had to be opposites because we're told they are. That's the left, that's the right. Wow, let's have a look at them. Let's just check this one out. The far left, as symbolized by Joseph Stalin, was into centralized control, military dictatorship and concentration camps. Now, the far right must have been very different because they're opposites. I read it somewhere. The far right are into centralized control, military dictatorship and concentration camps. And they were played off against each other. They're not opposites, they're opposames. One thing I think we need to remember all the time, opposites never fight. They never take part in wars, because the opposite of a state of mind that believes that war is an option and conflict is an option and violence is an option is the state of mind that says it's never an option, because violence and war and conflict never solve anything. That never fights that, because that doesn't want to know. What fights wars? Two aspects of the same state of being. So the elements of society that create the divide and rule are not even different states of mind, they're the same state of mind with a slightly different name. Now, going on from this imprisoning of the consciousness into what I call the eggshell goes something else very important. But this is the structure that has allowed this control by the few of the many to go on throughout this period I'm talking about. Because if you're going to hold people in that eggshell of perception and thought and possibility, you have to keep from them vast amounts of information that would set them free. Set them free to understand that the world is being controlled in the first place, and also set them free from their own sense of limitation. So throughout this period of time, the same structure can be seen, and it can be symbolized, as you see here, by a pyramid. You've got a tiny, tiny few people at the top of the pyramid who hoard the really advanced knowledge, the knowledge that would set us free if we had access to it. And the rest of the pyramid is fiercely compartmentalized. So the further you come down into the mass of the people, the less that knowledge is in circulation, until you reach the point where it's hardly in circulation at all. And this structure of knowledge in the hands of the few and the masses kept in ignorance is one that goes on again and again and again, and without it, frankly, this manipulation simply couldn't happen, and the world would not be as it currently is and has been for thousands of years. And the nature of some of this information, years ago, as we'll come to as we tell the chronological story in a second, maps of the world existed, which for instance, the ancients knew that the American continent was there. The idea that Christopher Columbus was the first European to discover the American continent, I mean, it's just ludicrous. I've just seen a pig fly across here for a start. I mean, it's just crazy on basic evidence. And if you had maps of the world and the mass of the people didn't know they existed, that again gives you a significant knowledge which most people don't have. But now we're in what you might call the modern world. We're in a situation where fantastic technology exists outside the public arena, which we don't know about. And if we did, it would be a very different world. We're in a situation where fantastic technology exists outside the public arena, which we don't know about. And if we did, it would be a very different world. A little while ago, when I started to get a bit of a profile in this information, I was invited to a meeting with a guy in America who works for the CIA as a scientist, against his will. And he told me of the amazing technology that has not just been available more recently, it's been available for decades. Technology that would create abundant growth in deserts without water, end of famine in Ethiopia and other places in the world. That would give us all the power and warmth we need in our homes, in our businesses, in our factories, without using polluting fossil fuels and these other sources which are doing such damage to the planet. Technology which could cure cancer and so-called incurable diseases exists now. Why don't we have it? Because it would set us free, it would give us choice, and choice equals freedom. Lack of choice equals the opposite of freedom, the imprisoning eggshell that I'm talking about. So it's kept from us. And I asked this guy, just to give you an idea of what's going on the other side of the movie screen that's projected at us via the media and education and what we laughingly call that. I said to him the obvious question, if you don't like doing all this, why do you work for the CIA against your will? And he opened his shirt and he said, this is why. And it was a kind of a bizarre moment, because on one area of the room there was his children and his family, and yet I was looking at this father from this bizarre perspective of the world he lives in when he goes out the door in the morning. On his chest was a see-through sachet, or patch as they call them in the trade, and in it was this golden liquid which turns out to be a drug. And he went into work one day, because just because you work for the CIA or the FBI doesn't mean you want to control the world and unfold all this stuff I'm going to come to. Most people think they're serving their country. Why? Because they're down here in the pyramid. He went in to work one day, and he has missing time he still can't account for. He remembers just waking up, however, in this room, and when he woke up he realized this patch was there. And the reason it was there was this: his body had been manipulated to need that drug to survive. And if the drug is not replaced, and the patch has to be replaced every 72 hours, he starts to die. And after one incident, when he said no more, they did that. And this is just one of countless people all over the world who are geniuses in their area, that could use that genius to set the world free, who in fact use it because of this situation to further imprison the world and deny us the knowledge of the existence of these technologies, while the very same technologies are used against us to increase the control. Because, of course, knowledge is neutral. Technology is neutral. It's how you use it that is positive or negative, and is either freeing or imprisoning. So I got to the point, particularly in a book called And the Truth Shall Set You Free, where I'd, in very great detail, highlighted the structure of how the world is controlled today. And later on in this 2-video series, I'll get into that. But then you look at it, and you look at the scale of the structure and the detail of it and the way it works and the way all these different apparently unconnected institutions are actually connected, and you say, well, this could not have been put together in a few weeks, a few years, a few decades. So when did this thing start? And you go back. You go back. I got it comfortably to the time of the Crusades and the period that a lot of so-called knights organizations appeared, around the 1100s, 1200s, that kind of period, and into the 1300s. Very comfortably back then. Keep going back, keep going back. And eventually you're into thousands of years BC before you can pick up the thread of where this thing came from. And then you start to look at some of the great mysteries of the ancient world and ask a few questions, because conventional history says that we are at this time at the cutting edge of human knowledge. There was never any society or civilization in the past, or what we call the past, that was here or in advance of here. And in fact, the ancients were like primitive and didn't know much. Well, who built these then? The pyramids at Giza and some of the other great structures of the ancient world, which are mathematically, geometrically, perfection. Who built them? Bill and Ethel in the tent? I mean, who did it? Then you look at some of the other... This is Easter Island. I'm sure I know someone looks like that. I'm sure I know someone that was designed on. But this is, again, thousands of years ago. And them hats there are apparently 10 tons. Be interesting, wouldn't it? How did they get them up there? You know, you imagine it, can't you? Come on, Bill, bit more, left, right. Was done by high intelligence. No one knows where they came from. All the pyramids. Look at this. This is in Peru. Now, this has been done by an axe and chisel, isn't it? Look at the perfection of the way that stone is fitted into the rest. Can't hardly get a piece of paper between it. Thousands of years ago this was done by a primitive people. Oh, aye. Places full of pigs flying. Look at the size of this in Peru. You know, again, all right, Bill, bit heavier this time, to the left. Fantastic knowledge created these things in the ancient world. This stone there in the center is one of 3 weighing 800 tons, called the Trilithon, in a place called Baalbek, in what we now call the Lebanon. Thousands of years BC, that was built. And those 800-ton blocks had to be moved at least a third of a mile. Primitives did that. I read it somewhere. It must be true. He had letters after his name, the guy that said it. This is the Nazca lines in Peru again, on the Nazca Plains. There you have a situation where in the ancient world they scored away the top surface to reveal the white underneath. And amazing depictions of birds, insects and animals were created in this way. And some of them were only discovered in terms of what they were when we rediscovered, and I emphasize the rediscovered how to fly in this century. Because some of these things can only be seen from 1,000 feet, apparently. So there's a bird and here's a spider. Again, the Nazca lines. How did they do that, these primitive people all over the world? Because they were not primitive. In the sense that there was a group within ancient society that had amazingly advanced knowledge. And that's the knowledge that's been hoarded and passed over to the few into the modern world that is still used to control us and always has been used to control us. And it's amazing, you know, people talk about prophecy. Well, here's a confirmation that prophecy is absolutely fact and not some myth. On an ancient hillside, or not an ancient hillside, but a hillside with an ancient depiction of something on it in Devon, in England, here's an incredible prophecy of thousands of years later, the arrival on Earth of Bill Clinton. Bill comes into this in many ways. Sorry, my eyes are watering. It's all right. The cameraman's looking a bit pale as well. But Bill Clinton, again, President of the United States, as we'll see, all this stuff about, you know, Monica Lewinsky and all that stuff is actually obscuring what Bill Clinton's really involved in and what he's really connected to. Because, again, we're watching day after day a smokescreen and an illusion behind which the truth is. So, in the ancient world, there were people with fantastic knowledge. Where did that knowledge come from? I put this picture up just to emphasize the nonsense of how the idea that extraterrestrial life doesn't exist, how ridiculous it is. There are billions of stars in this universe. Apparently, estimated, I was reading, 1 billion in this galaxy. How many galaxies in the universe? That's just the physical universe. What about all the other parallel universes? What we call creation is alive with life. And yet it's become a situation where you're ridiculed if you talk about extraterrestrial life over the years. You know, you get people saying, hey, he thinks there's other life in the universe more intelligent than me, you know. And you think, darling, I've seen a cup of coffee more intelligent than you. But the point being that to say that in this amazing mass of life in this galaxy alone, that life as we know it has only evolved on this one tiny little planet in this one solar system, that's credible. Oh, yeah, scientists say that. And yet to say there must be life elsewhere on the law of averages alone is to be, oh, he's a bit strange, he believes in extraterrestrials. But when you look dispassionately at the evidence, and that's the point, if you come into this stuff with a belief to defend, might as well go and watch The Price is Right, because the belief will defend itself. And that's the point, if you come into this stuff with a belief to defend, might as well go and watch The Price is Right, because the belief will defend itself. If we let the information lead us rather than the preconceived idea, it takes us into some very interesting areas. First of all, when you look at ancient texts and traditions all over the world, literally all over the world, you find very clear descriptions of an advanced race or races that we would call extraterrestrial, not of this planet, that came to this planet and brought this advanced knowledge a long, long time ago. Some of the most famous examples of this are what have become known as the Sumerian texts or tablets. They were found in what we now call Iraq in the last century, about 1850. There's thousands of them. And they've been translated by a number of people, most famously a guy called Zecharia Sitchin. People think he's the only one that's done it because of the publicity and stuff that he's got in his books, but many other people have done it, and actually have come to a slightly different interpretation than him. But the common theme of all of them is this, that a group which the Sumerian tablets, which were buried around 2000 BC, something like that, they talk about this group they call the Anunnaki. In Sumerian, those who from heaven to earth came, which is the basic translation, but those who came from the high place and down to the earth overall is the feel of it. The Anunnaki. And when it talks about these Anunnaki and the tablets and stuff, here's an example of just one of the so-called cylinder seals that were found among them, depicting various things. There are some remarkable points and areas of text and evidence that you can see. First of all, there is remarkable knowledge in these texts of planetary, solar system, universal, astronomical knowledge that has only been confirmed in this century, and sometimes even more recently. In the text, for instance, they describe what Uranus and Neptune look like in a way that's only been confirmed in literally the last few years. They depict the solar system with planets that have only been found in the last century and the 20th century. How did they do that? What they say is the knowledge was brought by this Anunnaki. But it's more than that, because it talks in some detail about how this Anunnaki interbred with humanity, creating a hybrid race. And you find this theme all over the world. You find it in Genesis, in the Bible, which is a rewrite, when you do the research, of the Sumerian stories. So we get the theme of the sons of God, who interbred with the daughters of men. But when you take that back to the Hebrew, just one step, you find that that phrase, sons of God interbred with the daughters of men, actually says sons of the gods interbred with the daughters of men. And every time in the Old Testament you see the word God, it's translated from a word meaning gods. And it's clear to me that we have been misled and we've misunderstood the difference between the gods, symbolically extraterrestrials in the ancient world, and God, which is all consciousness, all energy, everything that exists. So these Sumerian tablets very much confirm this ancient race. Now, again, when you look at other cultures, you find the same stories. In the ancient Hindu cultures, the Vedas, their ancient holy books, you find descriptions of the gods flying in flying machines, which we would call aeroplanes or UFOs or flying saucers, whatever. And when you take the common theme around the world, it's very clear that in the ancient world was a race or races of very, very high technological knowledge. And this was the knowledge that built the pyramids. This was the knowledge that built all those ancient structures which conventional history and archaeology simply cannot explain. Now this area here of what we call the asteroid belt would seem to be very, very significant. If you take Zecharia Sitchin's translation of the Sumerian tablets, the detail of which I have a problem with, I must say, here and there, they talk about, according to his translation, that a planet called Nibiru, the planet of the crossing in his translation of the Sumerian, came into this solar system a vast, vast amount of time ago. And one of its moons collided with a planet that was between Jupiter and Mars, and that created the asteroid belt, which just happens to be between Jupiter and Mars. That's one interpretation of what happened, but there are others, and I've come across a scientist, a friend in America, who's been researching all this for 30 years, and he is convinced from a large amount of different evidence that actually something different happened, not least because at a major corporation he used to work for, they did a study, the physicists at that corporation, into what must have happened to the solar system, because when you look at the planets and how they spin and how fast they spin and all this stuff, it's very clear that some major, major disruption has happened in this solar system. It's affected not just the Earth, but also the other planets. It's a major cataclysm. And they came to the conclusion, which basically supports the theme of a guy called Immanuel Velikovsky in the 50s, who was ridiculed for saying that what we now call Venus went through this solar system, devastated Mars, and almost destroyed the Earth. But these physicists are actually supporting the basis of that. What they believe as a result of their research is that the planet we now call Jupiter came into this solar system not that long ago, remarkably, 7,000 years ago maybe, something like that. 4,800 BC was the date that I was given for the window of time that had happened. And it collided with a planet that was in that area, and devastation unfolded, and the asteroid belt was the result. They also suggested that a great chunk of Jupiter, which is a colossal planet, of course, broke off and careered through the solar system and devastated Mars. Interestingly, the probes to Mars have suggested that the landscape of Mars is no more than 10,000 years old, so something certainly happened there that devastated it, and came close enough to the Earth and was caught in the Earth's field for a while, did a couple of orbits, and that orbit, when you look at the scientific suggestion of what that would have caused, starts to confirm some incredible legends, traditions, and oral and written evidence from the ancient world all over the planet that there came what the Bible calls the Great Flood. One of the things that this would have done, this pass by what we now call Venus, is to have created a 10,000-foot tidal wave. Interestingly, in the pre-flood world, since then, agriculture as we know it began at heights above 10,000 feet. Quite obvious why that would have happened in the scenario we're talking about. It is also suggested, and my other research, and in the book The Biggest Secret, it's detailed and documented in great detail, is that there was a Martian race, which was the white race, which actually came to the Earth and was interacting with the Earth, but as a result of the devastation and destruction of Mars, actually came here because it needed to survive. And this white Aryan Martian race based itself, and those that were here at the time of the cataclysm survived as a result of going into the high places in the Near East, what we now call Turkey, Caucasus Mountains, Iran, and that sort of area. And the amazing culture that appeared there, and I'll come to that in a second, was the result of this knowledge. This is another map of Europe and North America. Again, I'm talking about a cataclysm here, maybe about 4,800 BC, but there have been many of them. When you look at the geological and biological records, it's very clear this planet has had many cataclysms, just talking about one. Earlier, around 13,000 years ago, there was clearly another. And that area, which they call Appalachia, which is now sea, was actually land in that window of 13,000 years ago. What we call the Alps, what we call the Himalayas and the Andes, those fantastic mountain ranges, only reached anything like their present height around 13,000 years ago. So the Earth, while we've lived through quite a stable period in known human history, actually changes its face from time to time, quite obviously because of various events. Atlantis was supposed to have been one of the ancient cultures back in the ancient world which had this advanced knowledge and was destroyed by cataclysm. And again, this is a theme all over the world when you look at the ancient texts and oral traditions of this land of high technology, of high knowledge that was destroyed by cataclysm. And so once this cataclysm and cataclysms had unfolded over this period of time, 13,000 down to 7,000 years ago, that kind of window, a number of them, that great ancient civilization of knowledge, what the ancients called the Golden Age, was wiped from the face of the earth, and we started again. But we started again with different levels of knowledge. Among the survivors of these upheavals were the mass of the people who survived, or the representatives of them, who were still in ignorance, and then again there were the few who had the knowledge. So it all started again. Same structure, and we've moved into the modern world where we're now at a point where we were a long, long time ago before these cataclysms wiped that civilization from the face of the earth. So what we're looking at here is the area that they concentrated on, where the white race actually came out of, interestingly. When they're talking about the Martian race being a white race and actually focusing in that area of the world, the Caucasus Mountains, southern Russia, that area, Caucasus Mountains, down into what we now call Turkey and those areas around there, Iran, that's where the white race came from. The actually original name of Iran translates as land of the Aryans. When you look at the Hindu culture, in the Indus Valley, which was one of these cultures, again, that spontaneously emerged with advanced knowledge, even conventional history accepts that that culture, the Vedas and the structure of the Hindu religion, etc., was taken into the Indus Valley by an Aryan white race from the Caucasus Mountains. And when the floodwaters started to recede, down from the high places, which could be the translation of Anunnaki, those who came from the high place, came down into the Indus Valley, into the plains and valleys of Sumer, and they created the Sumerian culture, which is accepted again by conventional history, didn't start at this level and gradually evolve. It started at a very high level of advancement and then gradually fell away. Same with Egypt. It started at a very high level of advancement and then gradually fell away. Babylon, another one. And again, there are different uses of knowledge. And Babylon appears to have been a center for those who were in a state of being that wanted to use this knowledge to control, because Babylon was where so much of the manipulation and control of today actually came out of. So, in short, we have an extraterrestrial race in that area interbreeding with humanity, creating hybrid bloodlines. Now, in The Biggest Secret, I go into this in much more detail, but it seems to me that along with this white Martian race was what UFO researchers have called a reptilian race. And the detail of that is documented there. And it's this reptilian race that also interbred with humanity, and I think the reptilian race were the Anunnaki. When the first interbreeding took place, the hybrids were half human, half Anunnaki, I think reptilian. And they interbred with this Martian race, this white race that became the race that took over the world, in effect. When a second interbreeding took place, it wasn't between the Anunnaki reptilian race and the humans, it was between the Anunnaki and their hybrid bloodstreams. So now we're going 75% Anunnaki reptilian, 25% human. These bloodlines, what I will call the pure bloodlines, the pure hybrids, these are the ones, when you trace into the modern world, that turned up as the pharaohs, as the ancient kings of Iran, the so-called serpent kings, that became the aristocracy of Europe, that became the royal families of Europe, and through the Great British Empire became the presidents, business leaders, bankers of the United States. The reason that these families of the Eastern establishment of the United States that produce the people that run America and the European aristocracy and royal families, the reason throughout history that they have obsessively interbred with each other and not outside is because they're trying to hold this genetic structure. This is a picture I took of a partial eclipse of the sun on a pyramid at Chichen Itza in the Yucatan, a Maya pyramid. And understanding the two levels of knowledge of the sun from the ancient world to today is to understand much about this manipulation and what's been happening in the world. On one level, the masses obviously focused on the sun because of its heat and warmth and its effect on their lives and their crops and all that stuff. But the few at the top of these pyramids of control, the advanced race, or races, if you like, they understood the much bigger nature of the sun. The fact that it is not just a source of heat and light, it is a fantastic generator of magnetic electrical energy which is affecting life on Earth second by second by second by second. And so, in summary, what you had here was a white Martian race which its hierarchy had this knowledge, and this Anunnaki reptilian race, and you'd have to see The Biggest Secret for the enormous documentation of that being true. And they also had this knowledge. And below both, you had the mass of the people who didn't have this knowledge of the sun and much else. And a tussle took place between these two races, and eventually the reptilian race, through their bloodlines, took control and now control the world. So let's have a look at the nature of this knowledge of the sun. What you're going to see now are sunspots. Great arcs of fantastic energy that are emitted from the sun in cycles. Sometimes they're very powerful, sometimes they're less powerful. And the sun is 99% of the mass of the solar system. When it changes, everything changes. And a great example of what I'm talking about and how it affects us and how the ancients knew about this is a guy called Maurice Cottrell. Earlier on in his life, he did a lot of research into sunspot activity, solar flare activity, these projections of energy from the sun, and he found that they could be put into various cycles. Small cycles, medium cycles, great cycles over thousands of years. Later on in his life, he came across the Maya information left in Central America, the Yucatan, by the Maya people who picked it up from previous people, and again you go back eventually to this extraterrestrial race, or races, emphasis on the races, and they have put together a symbolic and mathematical structure that talks about cycles of human evolution, small cycles, medium cycles, great cycles. And Cottrell found, to his surprise, that these Maya cycles of human evolution corresponded, even over thousands of years, in remarkable synchronicity with his cycles of sunspot activity, projections of energy from the sun. He also looked at the various historical cycles and found that the rise and the fall of great civilizations like the Roman Empire corresponded to these cycles of sun energy. So, when the sun changes, we change. We are encouraged at some points to be open to more aggression or more this or more that. Now, if you know that, and you know that at certain times the mass consciousness is more likely to react in a certain way, then you know, as you're manipulating the world, when to have your wars, when to have your economic collapses. And this is why, as many researchers, not just myself, have established, that these events tend to happen in key years relating to sunspot and sun energy cycles. Therefore, in the ancient world, there was the knowledge of the sun in its true importance, in its true effect, and then there was the mass of the people who just looked at it in a totally different way. And this is why in the cultures of the ancient world you found, again, here a chair from Egypt, a throne from Egypt, a Akhenaten chair, the pharaoh, sun. Gold, the solar color, the solar metal. This is why the obsession was with gold. Also, lions, you find tremendous symbolism of the lion. The lion with its long mane symbolized the sun, which is why it was always there. Here again in Sri Lanka, gold and the sun. Here in Rome, the two lions, the sun, and the disc, the sun. Again, understanding this. Now, here, much more recently, this is the sun chair of George Washington, first President of the United States. And the reason that you find the symbols of the ancient world used by this high advanced level of knowledge in the more modern world, right to the present day, among the secret societies and among the countries in terms of flags and symbols, etc., is because the same knowledge stream is used today and the same manipulation is used today as always was. Now, this is a symbol that explains so much about religion and many of the symbols you see in the modern world. Because of the focus on the sun in its various levels of importance and understanding, this symbol was devised in the ancient world to symbolize the passage of the sun through the year. They did the circle with the zodiac, zodiac coming from a Greek word meaning animal circle appropriately. They broke the circle into 4, the seasons, with the cross, and they put the sun on the cross. I've heard that somewhere before. So what they did is to focus their symbolism on this journey of the sun. This is why when you look pre-Christian, pre-Jesus, you find an endless stream of deities in the ancient world who were given birthdays of December the 25th. Why is that? Because around December 21st, 22nd, you have the lowest point in the sun cycle in the year, the northern hemisphere anyway, which is the winter solstice. And at that point, the ancients said the sun had symbolically died. The winter solstice. And at that point, the ancients said the sun had symbolically died. 3 days later, the sun had demonstrably started its journey back to its peak in the summer. And at that point, December the 25th, they said the sun was born or born again. And because Christianity was created by, in the form we know it, by a sun-worshipping Roman emperor called Constantine the Great, that's why Jesus was given the birthday of December the 25th, symbolic of the sun, which is what Jesus is to a large extent. The evidence that he existed is like almost non-existent, if not non-existent in total. So by Easter, the sun was entering the sign of the ram or the lamb. And so they had ceremonies in which they sacrificed lambs in the pre-Christian world because they believed that by sacrificing the lamb to the gods, they would have good luck and their sins would be forgiven and all that stuff. Now this is where the symbolism of Jesus and so many mirrors of Jesus in the pre-Christian world, that's why we constantly get this recurring story of the lamb who died so our sins could be forgiven. Now what the ancients also did is they symbolized the sun as a baby at the December the 25th time, as a kind of a youth at Easter, and as a strapping, strong, immensely strong man in the height of the summer, and losing his power in the fall, autumn, and then being an old man back towards the winter solstice. And they symbolized the sun as a person with long golden hair, just like the mane of the lion. And so this is where the Old Testament story of Samson comes from. Samson. And what happened was they had him with long hair, big strapping man, the sun at the peak of the summer. And then what happened in the story, he started to lose his strength. And what happened to make him do that? He had his hair cut. The rays of the sun were getting less and less powerful as he entered the house of Delilah, Virgo the Virgin, which is the astrological sign as you're entering into the fall. And so so often, and again in The Biggest Secret, this is documented constantly, this is why you get constant stories which we are asked in the masses to take literally, therefore a prison religion emerges, when in fact they're symbolic, and often symbolic of the sun. So, this is what this is, the Celtic cross. It's the circle and the cross, the symbol I've just had on the screen. This is NATO. NATO is a wholly owned subsidiary of this brotherhood, this group of bloodlines, the reptile-human bloodlines, the hybrids that run the planet. Again, this is the CIA symbol. Again, there's the cross with the sun on the cross. And this sun symbolism is something that you can read this brotherhood by. I came across this shot, or this symbol, in the City of London. Now, we'll get to this. The City of London is the operational epicenter of this global web of manipulation. And this is across the road from St. Paul's Cathedral. And again, you see the same symbolism, and on the center you've got the black sun. Now, the black sun symbolizes two things. It symbolizes the negative use of solar energy, and it also symbolizes something that's becoming more and more obvious, and people are becoming more aware of, and that's that it's not just the planets that go around the sun in the solar system. This solar system is also traveling around a central point, and that central point is known symbolically as the black sun, kind of a galactic center, and it takes 26,000 years for the solar system to go around that sun, and we are now in the process of completing one of those 26,000 year cycles, which is why the world is changing, and is going to change dramatically in the next 15 years to 2012. So again, this symbol keeps coming up in the modern world as well as the ancient one. Now, even in the design of cities, which this brotherhood has in the modern world controlled, you see exactly the same symbol. What you're looking at here is the Arc de Triomphe in Paris. Paris, like Washington and London, is a mass of esoteric symbolism and sacred geometry built by design into the street plan. And so what you have is the Arc de Triomphe with the circle around it. There's the center of the sun on the cross, if you like. And going off from there are 12 roads breaking up into the 12 segments, just like that symbol I showed you a few minutes ago. And this, again, is sun symbolism from the ancient world carried by this group. And even in the road, on the road plan around the Arc de Triomphe, you see the sun there making the point. But if you don't realize where all this is coming from, it just seems like kind of nice design. Again, up there, Order of the Knights Templar in the York Rite of Freemasonry. That symbol there with the cross and the crown is the way the symbol of the circle and the cross has been got into Christian churches without people realizing what it means. It's the same symbol, the cross and the circle. And again, you see the same symbol here. This is the famous painting by Leonardo da Vinci. Leonardo da Vinci was a very high initiate. In fact, he was the Grand Master of a elite secret society, still very much part of the manipulation today, called the Priory of Sion, S-I-O-N. And Sion comes from a Sanskrit word meaning the sun. The Priory of the Sun is what he's actually saying. And this guy was an initiate who knew the underground story and the underground knowledge. This is why Da Vinci was able to make predictions and draw pictures of various technologies that were well ahead of his time. Now what he's done here is present the Last Supper picture in the form of symbolizing that same symbol, the cross, and the sun on the middle and the circle. He's depicted Jesus as the sun, hence the halo around his head there, and he's broken up the disciples into 4 sets of 3, symbolizing the 3-month periods of the seasons and the sun going through them. This is why this constant recurring number of 12 and 1, the hero and the 12 followers, constantly reoccurs. This is why you have King Arthur and the Knights of the Round Table, the circle of the zodiac. This is why again and again the big religious heroes had 12 followers, the sun and the months and the areas of the zodiac. This is an ancient stone depiction of the Phoenician and many other cultures within the Middle Near East, but certainly the Phoenician sun god called Bel or Bil, who became the Canaanite Baal. And there you see the halo around the top of his head symbolizing the sun. And this is vastly ahead of the emergence of Christianity, which then used the halo, because the same symbolism was used, because again is Zoroaster depicted with the halo and the rays around his head, because these guys did not actually exist. They were symbols of the sun. That level of knowledge knows that. This level of knowledge, the masses, takes the symbolic literal, and you have a prison religion. So let's pick up how this all unfolded from here. Just to quickly summarize. In that area of what we now call Iran, Turkey, and the Caucasus Mountains, you had 2 advanced races at the same time. You had the Martian race, which came down and survived there and came out of there after the cataclysm involving Venus 7,000 years ago or so. But you also had another race, which the Sumerian text called the Anunnaki, a reptilian race. And they interbred in this program or programs that are described in the Sumerian texts. And interestingly, they describe how this Anunnaki did this interbreeding by using what we would call test tube methods. Now, of course, when these tablets were found in 1850, the idea of creating life in test tubes, utterly ludicrous, no longer. And so you had the interbreeding between the white race, the Martian race, and the Anunnaki. And the outcome of that was what appeared to be a human form, is what we'll call it today. But within that white race were particular bloodlines that were very, very reptilian. And again, you have to look in detail in The Biggest Secret to see the enormous documentation of this, but it's these bloodlines, this particularly the white, reptilian, the Anunnaki, Martian bloodlines, that actually have run the world ever since. demonstrably, the white race took the world over. They came out of the Caucasus Mountains and this area of the world in two basic ways. Go one way first, by land. They came out of the Caucasus Mountains, and incidentally, what do Americans call white people? Caucasian. Why do they call them after some mountains in the Near East? Because that's where the white race came from. They came across land into Europe, and they changed their names. They were the Scythians, they were the Sumerians, they were many different names, and if you follow the movement of people, you find that they became the white race of Europe. They became the Anglo-Saxon race because the Angles and the Saxons were simply different names for the same race. They became the Anglo-Saxon race because the Angles and the Saxons were simply different names for the same race. They became the Scandinavian peoples, they became the British, they became the French, they became the European white race. And within this white race were these Anunnaki bloodlines, these reptilian bloodlines. And these were the ones, when you do the research and the genealogy, that ended up again and again and again in the positions of power. Political, royal, economic, all of it. And so, not only did they come across land in that way, much earlier, around 3000 BC, through a white race called the Phoenicians, they went by sea to Britain. And what we call the British culture, which of course has had such an effect on passing on that culture to the rest of the world, is actually the Phoenician culture. It comes from the Near East. And the proof of that is endless in the artifacts and the legends and the stories that have been left. For instance, what you see there in that depiction on the coin, an ancient coin, is a Phoenician goddess called Barati. And on the other side, you see the classic depiction by the British of their goddess, Britannia. And they are the same, because Britannia was Barati. The Phoenicians worshipped two deities. One was the male, Barat, one was the female, Barati. And she became Britannia, and Barat and Barati became Baritan, and the Baritish. The British culture is in effect the Phoenician culture. Not only that, when you look at the names given to the goddesses and what have you, or in the Indus Valley, what we call the Hindu culture, they are the same. They are very, very close to the name Barat and Barati, because this white race, as I said earlier, also went in and created the Indus Valley Hindu culture. No accident that all the major religions in the world that were prisoners came out of this same area of the Middle and Near East. In Britain are white horses scored into the hillside. This is supposed to be the oldest one. It's a place called Uffington in Wiltshire. And it's been dated to around 3000 BC. That is precisely the time the Phoenicians arrived by sea into Britain, bringing the Barati, British culture as it became. Now, why would the Phoenicians score horses in the hillsides, the chalk hillsides of Britain? Very simple. The Phoenicians were sun worshippers. This was a Phoenician symbol of the sun. This is a Phoenician high priestess. Again, you see the swastika. The swastika was a Phoenician symbol of the sun. Quite a positive symbol, and what the Nazis did, because they understood this, is they turned it round to indicate the negative, because they understood the nature of the sun as well. This is a Phoenician stone found in Britain. There again you see the swastika. And what we call the British culture came from the Near East. Another thing that these advanced people within the Phoenician culture understood was the fact that the earth has through it and around it what is known as an energy grid or grids. These are force lines of energy. Some people call them ley lines, some people call them dragon lines in China, meridians, whatever. Where these lines of force cross, you create a vortex. Where many of these lines cross, you create a colossal vortex. and therefore you have enormous energy which you can use to create and do various things. This guy was an Englishman in a place called Herefordshire, and one day he was on his horse at the top of a hillside, and he suddenly looked down into the valley and saw these lines in a sort of psychic way all over the place, straight lines, and they connected the sacred wells, the sacred places of worship, the points where the churches were built, the hillsides, etc. And this now, as we have moved on, has been confirmed by the scientific world, those with an open mind anyway, that this grid system actually exists like a web around the world. Now, where these ley lines cross in their most powerful way, where most of them cross, just happens to correspond with where the ancients had their most sacred ceremonies and their most sacred places. Stonehenge and places like that were built on them. So where the lines come in and the vortex is created, that is where they built the Stonehenges. The Aveburys, another stone circle and energy complex in Britain. That's where they built all over the world their temples to access this energy. This is Avebury in Wiltshire. Now this is interesting. I used to live near here, and the Phoenicians built this with their knowledge. Now the Phoenicians, I would suggest, and the evidence is presented in The Biggest Secret, were originally a Martian race. What people like Richard Hoagland have found, who's investigated the Cydonia region of Mars, where they've found pyramids, etc., and other non-natural creations, is that if you look at the way that the various pyramids and non-natural points relate to each other in this area of Mars called Cydonia, and then you place them over Avebury in Wiltshire, England, they fit almost exactly. Avebury appears to be a mirror of Cydonia on Mars. Also, when you look at the background, there's very strong evidence that the pyramids in Egypt were built around 3000 BC, the very time these things were going up. And they built pyramids. What have they found on Mars? Pyramids. Also, as some scientific research has shown, when you put people in white bodies into sensory deprivation tanks, their natural rhythm is not the rhythm of the orbit of the Earth, it is the rhythm of the orbit of Mars. And a scientist friend of mine said to me once, after I first met him, he said, you know, there's a point in the world where on one of these magnetic grids systems called the Hartmann grid, 12 of these meridian lines cross at the same point and go down in the Earth. Amazing place. I said, where's that? He said, a place called Avebury in England. The ancients knew this. This is Silbury Hill, the biggest man-made mound in Europe, right next to Avebury. This is Stonehenge. It's one of the crop circles down the bottom there, or the crop formations, 125 circles I think there is in that. These ancients, coming from this advanced knowledge, this is Tara in Ireland, all over this area of Britain. This is Glastonbury Tor, not too far from Avebury and Stonehenge. And then you come to the pyramids of Central America, the Yucatan. Why is the basic culture and the stories and the beliefs and the building methods of Central America, South America, the same as Europe? Because when you follow this research, you find that the Phoenicians not only went to Britain in the ancient world, they crossed the Atlantic also. Phoenician artifacts have been found in Brazil, for instance, and what could well be Egyptian, certainly Egyptian or Oriental artifacts, have been found in the Grand Canyon. The reason that the stories and the beliefs are so similar, almost exactly the same, in the American continent as the European continent, when they weren't supposed to have met, is because it was taken from across the Atlantic into the Americas by this white race. Babylon, I mentioned earlier, was very important. It was in Babylon that a large number of these reptilian human, reptilian Martian, whatever you want to call them, reptilian white bloodlines focused themselves. And in Babylon, they created the structure which can be found in every religion, because they understood if you got a certain structure and called it a religion, you could imprison the human mind. And so when you look at the religious belief and structure and stories of ancient Babylon, you're looking at the ancient stories that followed. For instance, where have you heard this before? Nimrod, the father, and Tammuz, the son, were the same. Father-son. And then you had Queen Semiramis, who was the mother, the virgin mother of Tammuz. So in Babylon, vastly before Christianity, you had Nimrod, Tammuz, Semiramis. Father, mother, son. The Trinity. And Nimrod was symbolized in many different ways. And one of the ways he was symbolized was as the eagle looking both ways. And what you're looking at there is a symbol of modern Freemasonry. The symbols of the modern secret societies that control the world to this minute are the symbols of ancient Babylon and this period where it all, this area of the world where it all came out of. Incidentally, another aspect of Nimrod died with a lamb at his feet, was put into a tomb, and when after 3 days they pulled the stone back, there was no one there. I think I've heard that somewhere before too. This is another sun god who didn't exist, called Mithra. This is another sun god who didn't exist, called Mithra. In Persia, Rome, and in Mithra artifacts have been found even in Britain. And what did they say about this guy, Mithra? He was born on December the 25th. He was born to a virgin mother. He died so our sins could be forgiven. They brought gold, frankincense, and myrrh to his birth. And that they called him the vine. They called him the Lord, the shepherd. All the things you see in the New Testament, you see said about Mithra. And where the Roman Catholic Center is now, the Vatican, on that site, they found Mithra artifact, because it was a place of Mithra worship. And Mithra ran right up into the Jesus period, and they basically changed the name of Mithra to Jesus, and we had another religion. What they said about Jesus on the right there, and what they said about Horus, the son of God of ancient Egypt, was identical. Because Nimrod, Tammuz, Semiramis in Babylon, when these reptile human bloodlines took over the culture of Egypt, which had been started by the white race, the Phoenicians, they just transferred the same story and called it different names. So Nimrod, Tammuz, Semiramis in Babylon became Osiris, Isis, and Horus in Egypt. And again, right across the world, in different cultures and different eras, you see different names for the same deities. There seems to be a mass of names, very confusing. In fact, they're different names for the same deities. The cross is supposed to be a Christian symbol. It's not. It goes back as far as history goes back. This is a standing stone with a cross. Here we have Mother Mary holding Jesus, except that we don't. This is how the Egyptians symbolized Isis holding Horus. And again, in my book, The Biggest Secret, you'll see massive documentation of how this story just goes on being repeated. The initiates know what it means, the brotherhood, the mass of the people are asked to take it literally. What actually turned Christianity into the religion it became, and who decided what Christians believe to this day, was a Roman emperor called Constantine the Great. In 325 AD, he called a meeting of bishops in the early Christian church to his palace at Nicaea, now Iznik in northwest Turkey, and there the Nicene Creed was created. After they'd had a punch-up and ripped up documents and all that stuff, they decided the Nicene Creed would be as it is to this very day, and that's what Christians are supposed to believe. In this sign you will conquer, what Constantine said, and he was a sun worshipper. He worshipped a deity called Sol Invictus, the unconquered sun, and Mithra and all this stuff. He had no problem with Jesus because it was just a different name he believed for what he was already believing anyway. What he said was that before a battle, when he was battling to become emperor, he saw a cross in the sky from Jesus saying, by this sign, or in this sign you will conquer in the battle, which sounds massively like what the Prince of Peace would say, doesn't it, really? So Christianity was a manufactured religion. Here we see the Pope. There's the Maltese cross, a brotherhood symbol that you can see to the present day. I'll come to that shortly. But on the Pope's head is the mitre. And if you look at it sideways on, it's actually a fish head. Why is it a fish head? Because that's the symbol of Nimrod, the Babylonian god figure, who they symbolized as a fish, as they symbolized his partner Semiramis as a dove. And this is where the fish comes from in Christianity, as well as the House of Pisces. So basically, and the Biggest Secret documents this in detail, the Babylonian group moved home to Rome, the New Babylon. Now also in this story, if we move forward to the time of the Crusades in the 1100s, 1200s, you find that in the Middle East at that time, a series of knights organizations suddenly appeared, which are still going today, and among their members today are some of the top people in global politics, business, banking, military, media, etc. They were the Teutonic Knights, which relate to Germany. They were the Knights Hospitaller of St. John of Jerusalem, and St. John, incidentally, is a symbol of Nimrod, for reasons the Biggest Secret explains. And the other one, which I'm going to concentrate on for a few minutes, was the Knights Templar. And they all appeared around Jerusalem at the time of the Crusades. And the Knights Templar said that they'd created this organization originally to protect pilgrims who were visiting the Holy Land. Well, there's only 9 of these fellas for 9 years, which is going to protect a massive amount of pilgrims, clearly. After they'd parked themselves in Jerusalem, right next to what we now call Temple Mount, the so-called scene of Solomon's temple. But when you look at the background of Solomon, there is no evidence he existed outside the Old Testament, and every syllable of Solomon means the sun, another symbol. Anyway, after 9 years in the Jerusalem area, next to the Temple Mount, suddenly things started to move very rapidly for the Templars. Some of them went back to Europe, and they started signing up the noble families of Europe, and to particularly France to start with. And to join the Templars, you had to give them all your wealth. So they became massively wealthy very, very, very quickly. And they created 2 basic financial centers in their empire. One was in Paris, one was in London. Today, Paris and London are the 2 key centers of the operational level of the manipulation of the world. No coincidence. After a while, however, the King of France, Philip the Fair, who was up to his neck in debt to the Templars, decided that he was going to remove them. Now, this thing about debt's very important. You can follow through these bloodlines out of the Middle East, these reptilian human bloodlines that became the European aristocracy, etc., a number of themes that keep reoccurring. One is creating prison religions based on the basically same story, keep masses in ignorance. 2 is satanic ritual and blood drinking and such human sacrifice ceremonies, which are still going on today to the same deities they did in the ancient world. And thirdly, the scam, where you lend money that doesn't exist to the population and charge them interest on it, which is what happens to this very day, of course. The debt we call debt in the world is actually debt that doesn't exist. It's just figures on a screen. There's no money involved at all. It's just a thought form. So what happened with the Templars is that they played this scam because they were part of this stream, and they got the crown heads of Europe up to their neck in debt to them, just as their successors have the governments of the world today in debt to them. So Philip the Fair wanted to bring an end to this, and there's more to that story as well. And on Friday the 13th, in October 1307, he issued orders, supposedly secret orders, to arrest the Templars on that morning. That's why Friday the 13th has been deemed unlucky ever since. Now, he got some of the Templars, but he didn't get most of them. They got away, and they went in 3 basic directions. One, they crossed the Atlantic to the Americas, and two other directions. First of all, they went off from their port at La Rochelle in France with the loot, because when Philip the Fair went to get the loot from the Templars in their headquarters in Paris, it had all gone. And they went in their ships, one group of them, around the outside, the west coast of Ireland and into Scotland. And there's a reason they did that, two reasons in fact. First of all, Philip the Fair enlisted the support of the Pope to purge the Templars. But Scotland, with Robert the Bruce, etc., was in conflict with the Pope at the time, and therefore excommunicated, and therefore the Destroy the Templars order didn't apply in Scotland at that time. And also a tremendous number of these bloodline families out of the Near East, these reptile human bloodlines, came out of northern France and Belgium, what we call that area now anyway, and went into Scotland almost en masse. Within 150 years, these bloodlines were running Scotland, and they have the names today that we think are Scottish. We go, Hamilton, Orkney, and MacDougall, Orkney. Scottish? No, no. They came out of that area of northern France and Belgium. And they were the same bloodlines. Robert the Bruce was one of them, that the Templars were connected to. So the Templars went into friendly territory. And they went underground because of the purge, and they re-emerged eventually as the Scottish Rite of Freemasonry. This is why the biggest secret society in the world today that pervades world politics, business, banking, the media, etc., is called the Scottish Rite, after this tiny country at the top of the British Isles, because that's where the Templars went when the purge happened. This is a Knights Templar. You'll see the red cross on the white background. That was the Phoenician fire cross or sun cross. And this is why the flag of England is a red cross on the white background. It's also why you had the Red Cross organization, which is also linked to this network at the highest level. Now here's the flag of England. It's called the St. George's Cross. Now, two big British deities were St. George, who killed the dragon. And the more I research this, the more I feel that is symbolic of this battle between this Martian white race and this Anunnaki reptilian race, because the dragon was very much used to symbolize this serpent race in the ancient world. And so St. George is not actually a British deity, it's actually Phoenician, because that's where the Phoenicians went, to Britain. St. Michael, which is a great Christian deity, was an ancient Phoenician deity also, and areas of Europe, like called St. Michael's Mount, one in England, southern England, came from the Phoenicians who settled that area. Now, the Templars then moved out of France around into Scotland, and that was one area they went. They went across to the Americas, and they also went down to Portugal. Now, before I get into that, let me show you one thing in Scotland which confirms so much of the fact the Templars were there, and indeed there are many artifacts to prove it, and other evidence. And that's this place, Rosslyn Chapel, in just south of Edinburgh. It is the great city on the east coast of Scotland. And this was built on the land of the St. Clair family. Now, the St. Clair family were a French bloodline going back to the Near East that went to Scotland and became the Sinclair family, that classic Scottish name Sinclair. And this is one of the great holy grails of the Brotherhood today, the Rosslyn Chapel. Now, in the stonework of Rosslyn Chapel, you see sweet corn plants, aloe plants, and cactus plants, etc., that at the time this was built were only found in America. Perhaps still are, I don't know, but certainly then. Which is remarkable, because this was built before Columbus left on his journey to discover America. In other words, they'd been long before, they just didn't want us to know it. So, as they went to Scotland, so another group of Templars came down to Portugal, which will connect into America now as we start to enter the modern world. They hid behind an organization called the Knights of Christ, the Knights Templar under another name, and they were a maritime organization because the Templars had a massive fleet of ships. And actually they flew on their ships the flag of the Skull and Bones, which has become known as the pirate's flag. It was the Templar flag, which is why the Skull and Bones is still a symbol today of this brotherhood. And one of the grand masters of this Knights of Christ, the Templars under another name, was a guy called Prince Henry the Navigator. And he had access to maps of the world that the general population never had because of this pyramid, knowledge, ignorance. This is significant because the father-in-law of Christopher Columbus was a sea captain close to Prince Henry the Navigator. So Columbus was not looking for India when he found the Americas. He knew basically where he was going because the maps already existed. Because this unfolding agenda has a time scale, not least through the sun cycles, etc., it means that although they knew the Americas existed, the point had come in the agenda where it had to be officially discovered and therefore occupied by the European races. Now, Christopher Columbus, his name wasn't actually Columbus, his name was Colon. Why did they call him Columbus? Because in the various, not just religious but other historical texts, you see the codes and the code names that the initiates would understand that the general population do not. I mentioned a few minutes ago that the symbol for Nimrod was the fish and the symbol for Queen Semiramis was the dove. Columbus means dove. In French today, colombe actually still means dove. And the Romans in the Roman Empire worshipped a deity called Venus Columba, Venus the dove. Both Venus and the dove were symbols of Queen Semiramis, this deity. So that's where he got his name, Columbus. But there's more actually to look at in terms of this. Because 4 or 5 years after Columbus found that part of the Americas, down the Caribbean, etc., another guy left Bristol, England. And Bristol comes from Barati, that's where the name evolved from, the Phoenician deity. His name was John Cabot, and he discovered what we now call North America. Conventional history has not put Columbus and Cabot together, but you can do, not least through the research of a Freemasonic historian of great reputation called Manly P. Hall, who points out that Columbus and Cabot both operated in Genoa at the same time, and both were connected to the same secret society network. And within a few years, 4 or 5 years of each other, one finds one part of the Americas, the other finds another part of the Americas. Just a coincidence, nothing to worry about. What was actually happening was the time scale had come to take over America, and it moved on after that. So Columbus was a front man and a knowing one. There's one other group that came out of this Near East which it is vital to talk about, and it relates actually to Columbus too. We've seen how one group of peoples moved by land across from that Caucasus, Turkey, Iran area and across to become the white races of Europe. We've seen how the Phoenicians went to Britain much earlier than that, 3000 BC, but there was another group which came out of the Middle Near East and parked themselves in Venice in northern Italy. And these Phoenicians became the Venetians. And they created a maritime, because they were a maritime nation, the Phoenicians, and financial empire out of Venice. And that financial empire was based on lending people money that didn't exist and charging interest on it and funding both sides in wars. Now, within these white Phoenician bloodlines, yet again, were these reptilian bloodlines, these Anunnaki bloodlines. And again, you'll have to refer to the biggest secret to see the enormous evidence that this stuff about the Anunnaki and the reptilians is correct. While they were in Venice, this group of Phoenicians Anunnaki became known as the Black Nobility because they started creating titles for themselves and taking over titles that already existed, and they got this nickname, the Black Nobility. Now, some of the so-called Jewish banking names of the world today, like the Warburgs, not actually Jewish at all, because they came out of this group in Venice. The Warburgs, who were fundamental in creating the Federal Reserve, the so-called Central Bank of America, which is privately owned from people in Europe, the Warburgs were called the Abraham del Banco family in Venice, and they became the Warburgs when they moved up into Germany and Europe. So eventually, this black nobility in Venice moved north through Germany and centered themselves in Amsterdam. In 1688, one of this black nobility called William of Orange was manipulated onto the throne of England as William III. With that, this whole shebang moved across and created its epicenter in London. So at that point, those bloodlines that had gone much earlier through the Phoenicians into Britain and those that had come cross land and also through Venice actually came together in London. It was William of Orange, a few years after he became king, who signed the charter that created the Bank of England, and the central banking system was created. It was after that time that the City of London financial district became the center of global finance, and it was after that time that we got the great British Empire, when these bloodlines were expanded from Britain all over the world, to Africa, to Australia, to Asia, to the Americas. And what started out in Babylon and the Near East and moved outwards now went global because of the British Empire. People say that because the British Empire and these European empires have actually contracted since then, that it can't be true that the world's still controlled from London and these cities. But there's two ways of controlling people. One has a finite life, one can go on forever until someone exposes it. The first one is overt, in-your-face control, the dictatorship, where Britain controls this country and controls that country. The people in that country know where they are. They're controlled by an outside force, like the Russians during communism and the Germans during Hitler. That has a finite life because eventually, when you know where you stand, you're going to rebel against that control. Much more subtle to replace that overt control with covert control, where people are controlled but they don't know that they're controlled. People don't rebel about the fact that they're not free if they think they are. So what happened as the contraction came of these empires, not least the British Empire, is while on the surface it seemed to be over, left outside in those countries, back in those countries, were the bloodlines and the secret society network, which has continued to control those countries from this point on. Because what happened in that ancient time is that you had the positive use of knowledge, and they created mystery schools and secret societies in Egypt and elsewhere to pass this advanced knowledge on in a positive way. You then had this other force, largely out of Babylon, that also created mystery schools and secret societies for very different reasons, to pass on the advanced knowledge only to the chosen ones that they chose, and they created the institutions, these same secret societies, in the public arena that sucked that advanced knowledge out of circulation. Not least the Inquisition, when, 2 minutes into this video, I would have signed a suicide note during the Inquisition. So therefore, you had a situation in which the knowledge was passed on to the few and the institutions created by that secret society network to suck it out of public circulation. Eventually, and people like Manly P. Hall have documented this, that negative use of knowledge, that negative structure of mystery schools and secret societies also infiltrated eventually and took over the positive mystery schools and secret societies. So that negative use of knowledge, that negative structure of mystery schools and secret societies also infiltrated eventually and took over the positive mystery schools and secret societies. So we reached a point eventually where knowledge was passed on only to the few at the highest level who had a malevolent intent, and it was sucked out of the public arena big time. So the structure today is basically this. The epicenter on operational level is in London. That's where the global agenda is decided. And in these different countries, like America, the United States, South Africa, etc., you have bloodline branch managers, as I call them, who run those particular countries in line with a centrally decided and coordinated agenda. In South Africa, you've got the Oppenheimer family, who are the bloodline controllers of South Africa before and after Mandela, control the stock market, the diamond mines, and the gold mines and the other industries and the media. In America, the bloodline branch managers are the Rockefellers and the cartel of the Eastern establishment. who get their orders from the centrally coordinated epicenter in London and Paris, particularly London, and they run America in line with that. So wherever I go, in the 20-odd countries I've talked in and researched in so far, the same policies, the same structures exist because they're coming from a central point. And the world is controlled, therefore, by a very, very few people. One of the bloodlines centered in London are the Windsors. In The Biggest Secret, I expose some stunning, breathtaking information about the real nature of the Windsors and the bloodlines. These are black nobility bloodlines who go back through this story that I've been talking about, and that's why they have so much power and so much wealth and so much influence, because they're meant to, but not for long. Now this is Ben. Everyone knows that the founding fathers believed in freedom in America. Well, some of them might have done, but some of them didn't. Because what happened in 1776 and afterwards, when America to this day believed it was becoming an independent nation and free, what happened was that overt control of the Americas through the colonies was replaced by covert control. America has never been free of Britain's influence and control to this very day, and it's about time it was. And people like Benjamin Franklin, and I document this in detail in The Biggest Secret, were agents of British intelligence and the British Crown. This guy was parked in Paris as an ambassador in Paris, and he spent tremendous amounts of time in London. More than that, I said earlier that one of the common themes of these bloodlines through history is blood drinking, satanic ceremonies, etc., human sacrifice. That's what this guy was into. He was one of the top Freemasons in America. He was a member of key Freemasonic lodges in France, which created the French Revolution, like the Nine Sisters Lodge, and he was a member of a really elite secret society and satanic human sacrificing, blood drinking operation in Britain called the Hellfire Club, run by a British government minister called Sir Francis Dashwood, and who built underground chambers in his estate at Wickham, north of London, to do the sacrificing and stuff. That may sound amazing, but just a little while ago in the British newspapers, this story broke. Again, while Benjamin Franklin was fighting for freedom for the American colonies, he parked his bum in London. And he lived in a place called 36 Craven Street near Trafalgar Square. Well, they've just been renovating that to turn it into a Benjamin Franklin museum. And bingo, they found 10 bodies underneath the floor, 6 of them children, and they've dated them to the time Benjamin Franklin lived there. They've said, oh, he must have been into body snatching. When you link it to his other activities, I think there's probably another explanation. Thomas Jefferson, again, one of the aristocratic bloodlines from Europe, and a guy who was a member of the Rosicrucian secret society and other esoteric secret societies that carried this knowledge. He just didn't tell anyone else about it. He also owned 200 slaves, Thomas Jefferson, while writing that every man is created equal. Slight contradiction there, I feel. Maybe we're all equal unless you've got a black face. And so when you look at the presidents from the very start, this is George Washington. Again, another of the aristocratic bloodlines from Europe that became presidents of the United States. When I'm talking about these same bloodlines taking over Europe and then through the British Empire taking over America and other countries, I'm not kidding. When you do the genealogical research, you find some remarkable statistics. Since George Washington became president in 1789, and including him, every single American presidential election has been won by the candidate with the most British and European royal genes. And that comes from Burke's Peerage, the Bible of aristocratic genealogy on the planet, based in Britain. We've had, at the time that I'm speaking these words, 42 American presidents. 33 of them are genetically related to England's Alfred the Great and Charlemagne, the most famous monarch of France. Way back, he became monarch for the Holy Roman Empire. Of the 42 presidents, 19 have been genetically related to England's King Edward III, who has thousands of blood connections to Prince Charles. And then you look at Bill Clinton. Bill Clinton's a kid from Arkansas, we all know that. Not connected to any bloodlines, just a kid off the street, made good, because anyone can become president in America. I know, I read it somewhere. Clinton is genetically related to the House of Windsor, to every Scottish monarch, to King Henry III of England, and to King Robert I of France. And this is why, because of his bloodline, that he was taken at a very early age and given this scholarship to Oxford University called a Rhodes Scholarship, which is given to bloodline people in the world to go and be indoctrinated into this agenda in Britain, and then they come back, and the ratio of them that become presidents or people in power behind the scenes in their countries is absolutely vast. It's because of their bloodline. There's a number of symbols which you can pick up, because there's a secret language of this brotherhood, again, that comes out of Babylon. And as the time has gone on, the malevolent use of this advanced knowledge through this, what you might call Babylon Brotherhood that emerged on a global level as it is today, has become the dominating force on the planet, interacting, as I talk about in detail in The Biggest Secret, with this Anunnaki extraterrestrial force or race. One of the symbols is the pyramid, and particularly the pyramid with the capstone missing, the pyramid and all-seeing eye. This was put on the dollar bill in 1933-34 by Franklin Delano Roosevelt, another of the bloodlines, who goes back to French aristocracy, which connects in with the British. And the symbol you're looking at was actually the symbol of a secret society called the Bavarian Illuminati, which was behind the French Revolution, and it goes much further back than that. So the obsession with symbolism and for other reasons, certain symbols, is phenomenal. People asked a few years ago during the presidency in France of Francois Mitterrand, why on earth did they put this big black pyramid, this glass black pyramid, next to the beautiful Louvre Museum? People can understand it, because from an aesthetic point of view it was ludicrous. But they built pyramids in Egypt to interact with the energy and to create a particular energy field. They did the same on Mars, it would seem, also. And they're doing the same in the modern world in the street plans. This is why, and we'll see this as this talk unfolds, why that pyramid was put there. And anyone know where that is? Many people in America will. It's Dealey Plaza. This is where they killed Kennedy, in Dealey Plaza. And the street plan of Dealey Plaza, where the first Freemasonic temple in Dallas was put, is a pyramid with the capstone missing. They killed Kennedy on the right-hand side, the grassy knoll near the number 5 there, and down the bottom of the pyramid in an underground car park is where they killed Lee Harvey Oswald, who was falsely accused of doing the deed, but you need someone to blame when you don't want people to know what really happened. And we'll see as this unfolds, and we'll talk about the Diana situation and her murder in Paris, the obsession with ritual and symbols is unbelievable, and it's one way of reading this brotherhood. The key brotherhood signature is the lighted torch. This comes from an ancient legend which goes back to the Watchers, or Anunnaki, the extraterrestrials. They were also called the Watchers in some ancient texts. And the legend was that some of these Watchers gave knowledge to humanity, or a certain section of humanity. And a number of deities have been invented in the various different cultures, like ancient Greece, etc., to symbolize this same story of the gods giving knowledge to certain numbers of humans. The most famous of these is this guy, Prometheus, the Greek god who was supposed to have come from the Caucasus Mountains, and he's holding, as you see, the flame. The flame is symbolic of knowledge, the sun, the illuminated ones. The Illuminati is one name for this brotherhood. The illuminated ones, those illuminated into this advanced knowledge. And so what you're looking at is a gold depiction of Prometheus in the Rockefeller Center in New York, put there by the Rockefellers, and there's a plaque to show that, because they, one of the bloodline families running America on behalf of the London Central elite, they know the symbolism of Prometheus. They know the symbolism of Prometheus. And so the lighted torch, or the flame, became the key signature of this brotherhood, and you can follow it. That's what this is. This is an exact replica of the Statue of Liberty in Las Vegas. That's why you've got the fairground ride behind. But what you're looking at is the lighted torch, the sun, knowledge, the illuminated ones, the Illuminati, the Brotherhood. Also around the head you see the rays of the sun. Now that's classic Queen Semiramis symbolism. That's basically Queen Semiramis of Babylon. And because of this difference between those in the knowledge, the few, and the masses who are not, people look in America and around the world at that in New York Harbor and they say, oh yeah, that's symbolizing the land of the free. No, no. It's symbolizing the opposite. It's saying, look, we run the show and we're telling you and you haven't even got a clue. And this is not actually new at all. This was given in terms of America, this was given, the Statue of Liberty, to New York by French Freemasons who were in the underground stream of knowledge of what it represented. And in Paris, to this day, in an island on the River Seine, there's the Eiffel Tower in the background, there is the French Statue of Liberty in the same way. Because, again, it symbolizes something to this brotherhood which the masses don't understand. When they killed Kennedy in Dealey Plaza, there's the grassy knoll over on the right there. Afterwards, they put in Dealey Plaza an obelisk, which is a Freemasonic symbol relating to the sun, the phallic symbol, the male energy. Again, goes back to ancient Egypt, etc. And at the top of that, after they killed Kennedy, they put a depiction of the lighted torch, because that is the Illuminati Brotherhood signature saying, we killed Kennedy, and we're telling you, and you don't even see it. What did they put on Kennedy's grave? To this day, the lighted torch. They call it the eternal flame, but it's their signature saying, we killed Kennedy, and we're telling you, and you're not even bright enough to see it. But of course, if you don't understand the story we're not being told, how can you see it? It just seems like the eternal flame, a positive thing. It's not. This is Paris. There's the Eiffel Tower. That is an exact replica, put there in the late 80s, of the torch held by both the French and the American Statue of Liberty. What is that? Where is that? That stands on top of the Pont d'Alma tunnel in Paris, almost on the spot underneath where Diana was killed in the car crash, and that has become the shrine, if you see the flowers there, to Diana, exactly as planned. And what have they put on the island where they buried her, or claimed to have done, at Althorpe Park in Northamptonshire in England, on the Spencer estate? They put the lighted torch, the signature, we did it. And we'll talk about that a little bit more in a second. There we go on the dime, the lighted torch, the Illuminati. What they also do is create street plans that have all these symbols in them. And when we get to the next video, I'll pick up that in Paris, take it into Washington, and talk about a stream of other things that relate to the basic structure I've already described. And I'll relate it to the assassination, because that's what it was, of Diana, Princess of Wales. And also, when we've looked at the structure of how we're controlled, we can look at the way out of here, because we're only controlled because we allow ourselves to be controlled, because we give our power away. We take it back, all this stuff is over. To summarize this first part, we had the intervention in the human genetic stream in two ways. First of all, a Martian race that came after the cataclysm to Earth settled themselves in that Middle Near East area. Not least because during the cataclysm, the only way to survive was to get to a very high place. Agriculture started at 10,000 feet and more. But complicating what would have been normally a simple story of Martians coming to the Earth, a white race, was this Anunnaki, this reptilian race that interbred, creating particular bloodstreams that it could connect with and therefore control. And it's these reptilian human bloodlines that became the bloodlines of the aristocracy and the royal families and the key establishment families of the world, which today, to this minute, still run the show. Their secret language and how they speak to each other and how they further manipulate us will become clear in the next video. Thanks for now. Okay, we come to the start of tape 2, and already we've moved a very long distance, both in the story and in the various elements that are being introduced into it. And one of the things that has come up a number of times and will come up many, many more times in the next hour or so is this subject of symbolism. It's not just that these symbols are signatures, and it's not just that they have them because it's almost a secret language, which it is. There's another major reason for symbols and why certain things are in certain places and why certain street plans are in a certain design rather than another. And that's because, and we'll get into this in the final tape in much more depth and detail, but everything that exists is energy. When you resonate energy to a certain frequency, that affects us in a certain way. You can look back at the sun cycles, for instance. The sun cycles affect us in different ways at different points in the cycle because it is a different vibration of energy. It's a different type of energy. In fact, it's the same energy, it's just a different expression of it. So if you have this knowledge, and I keep emphasizing this knowledge has been available to this few that have passed it on through initiation at the highest level of the secret society and mystery school network since the ancient world, since these bloodlines were introduced. If you know that knowledge, then you can use it to affect consciousness, to resonate, for instance, the energy field of a city in a certain way, which helps you to bring about your agenda and helps people to react and to be in a certain state of being, because they keep being affected by this repeating frequency. So this is why you look at the street plan of Paris, and I'm going to look at the street plan of Washington after this too, and you see the tremendous consistency in the way that these cities are created. But let's start with Paris. Here we have, as I mentioned in the first video, the Arc de Triomphe, which is a street plan representation of that symbol of the sun on the cross with the zodiac circle from the ancient world. But it's not just that, the 12 roads off and that symbolizing the sun. It's more than that. This is just the central point in this sequence, this pattern in Paris, which is one of the big, big centers of these ruling bloodlines. There's a close-up of the Arc de Triomphe looking down dead straight down the road which goes dead straight in that direction and dead straight in this one. And when you look in the direction we've just been looking at, in exact straight line with the Arc de Triomphe, you see this big modern arch, and there's another pyramid, but the big modern arch. The arch is a big symbol of Freemasonry. This is where we get Royal Arch of Freemasonry from. And the arch is very much a symbol of this secret society network, the Freemasons being one expression of it. So if we look again down in that direction, you see that modern arch straight down that road. Okay, now turn and look in the other direction, which is what we're doing in this shot. There you have the eternal flame, the Illuminati, the torch, and you're looking through that crowd there, dead straight down one of the most famous, if not the most famous, streets and boulevards in Paris, the Champs-Élysées. And if you go dead straight from this point, you go through that. The obelisk, the 3,200-year-old obelisk that was actually taken from Luxor in Egypt, one of the great sacred places, the Valley of the Kings and great sacred places of ancient Egypt, and it was put in Paris in this square. And again, it's dead straight with the Arc de Triomphe, dead straight with that other arch. We'll go on beyond that obelisk, and you see another arch, the three arches. That's also secret society symbolism, almost a kind of smaller representation of the Arc de Triomphe. And if you look through the center there, there's the obelisk of the one from Luxor. And if you keep coming straight, again, dead straight line, we're still moving from the Arc de Triomphe, you come to this thing. Our old friend, the big black glass pyramid I mentioned earlier, which was put there during the presidency of Francois Mitterrand. Why did they put that there? Because it was part of an emerging geometrical pattern in the street plan of Paris, which resonates the energy of that city, that key city to this brotherhood, in a certain vibrational range which they want to happen. So let's look now at Washington, D.C. Thousands of miles away across the Atlantic, but the same principles apply yet again. These images come from a book called Talisman of the United States. Excellent book, not terribly easy to get hold of, it seems. And the writer looked at the history of the building of Washington and how, when they built it, they put in the street plan, esoteric symbols, astrological symbols, and classic symbols like pentagrams and what we call Stars of David. And there you see a Star of David in the street plan of Washington. There's the Capitol building down the bottom. But it's not a Star of David, funnily enough. It's nothing to do with the Jewish race, the Jewish people. When you look back into the ancient world, this symbol can be found all over the place in the ancient Arab world and the ancient Hindu world, etc. When you look back into the ancient world, this symbol can be found all over the place in the ancient Arab world and the ancient Hindu world, etc. Became associated with Jewish people after the Rothschilds started using it when they developed their banking empire in Frankfurt in Germany and then wider afield. But again, you see in the street plan of Washington, the way it was designed from the start in the District of Columbia, District of the Dove. This is why we have British Columbia. It's why we have Columbia Pictures, why we have Columbia Broadcasting, CBS. They're all Queen Semiramis Dove symbolism. And incidentally, just as an aside, look at the symbols of those organizations. The symbol of Columbia Pictures, the lady with the lighted torch. Look at Columbia Broadcasting, the eye, the all-seeing eye, which is on the screen between every program. Columbia University, symbol, lighted torch, because they are brotherhood operations. And here in the street plan of Washington, there's the Capitol building in the center there. These streets, according to the research of Talisman of the United States, are actually lined up with where the sun comes up at the winter and summer solstice. Now, when you go back to the ancient creations and mounds and structures that were created by the Phoenicians and that white race in Europe and Britain and Ireland, you find exactly the same principles. There's a massive mound at a place called New Grange in Ireland, and there's a really narrow entrance to it which goes right into the center of the mound, and in the center it opens up into a cavern. Only at the winter solstice, if it's a cloudless morning, the sun comes up in exact line with that and shoots its golden light straight the way through this little narrow passageway and lights up the whole of the central cavern. And apparently there's a 6-year waiting list to be in there at the time that happens. And again, it's just the same principles, the same knowledge applied to the street plans. This is why the political buildings, etc., and the Freemasonic temples are built on the vortex points in the grid that the old stone circles and that were built on also. Now, I'm coming back to the street plan of Washington in a second, but there's something I need to talk about before we come back. What you're looking at behind me is a place about 75 miles north of San Francisco, next to the Russian River. It's called Bohemian Grove. That's what you see behind the trees there. And Bohemian Grove has become notorious in research into not just the global manipulation politically, etc., but also into those people who are looking into satanic ritual and human sacrifice and blood drinking and all this stuff, again, which can be charted with these bloodlines from the ancient world. And behind those trees are 2,700 acres of redwood forest, Bohemian Grove, where, and again in The Biggest Secret and some of my other books, I document how people are sacrificed there, the blood drinking and stuff goes on, involving some of the most famous people in America and also from further afield, presidents and business leaders and stuff like that, the Henry Kissingers of this world and the Bushes and people like that. So here you have the entrance to it, no through road, as far as I could get before it was no further. Here is a picture taken at Bohemian Grove in 1957. The guy standing up there is called Glenn Seaborg. He helped to develop plutonium. I think he was involved in the Manhattan Project that created the bombs that were dropped on Japan, etc. But look either side of him. To his right, you have Uncle Ron, Ronnie Reagan. Back in '57, just a B-movie actor. Going to be president of the United States. What, old Ron, you must be joking. Well, he became president. On the other side of Seaborg is Tricky Dicky, Richard Nixon, who went on to become President of the United States. And it's through these organizations, these elite secret societies and groupings like Bohemian Grove, that presidents and the other people in positions of apparent power, that's the route that puts them into these positions. Not surprising. Now here's another picture at Bohemian Grove. Just concentrate a bit on this one, because it was taken on a long, long lens. Every summer, they have a summer camp in which these elite members of this brotherhood go to Bohemian Grove to do their deeds and do their ceremonies and stuff. And they do them to the same deities that this bloodline has done, has worshipped and done their rituals to, right back into the ancient world thousands of years ago, where this story started. And what you're looking at here, staggeringly, is a group of people, some of the most famous people in America, in long gowns. Behind them there you see a 40-foot stone owl. And there's the fire between them, next to the lake at Bohemian Grove. Now, one might wonder, understandably, why the people that run the banking, political, economic system and the media in America should be dressed in long robes doing a ceremony to a 40-foot stone owl. I think we should be told myself. So what's it all about? Again, you have to go back to see the present. Back in the ancient world, these Phoenician, Canaanite, Babylonian bloodstreams, which have merged to become the controlling force in the world, they worshipped a deity called Moloch or Molech. It was a deity that was an aspect of Nimrod, who keeps coming up everywhere, of course. And what they used to do is sacrifice children to Moloch or Molech. They put them through the fire. And in the Old Testament, you see prophets condemning the people for putting their children through the fire to Moloch or Molech. When I've talked to contacts, therapists and what have you around the world who work with satanically abused people, what those people tell them is that, again, when they're sacrificing children, the deity in the modern world today that they use to sacrifice them to is Moloch or Molech. Same seamless stream. So the question comes in relation to this: how do they symbolize Moloch or Molech, this deity to which they sacrifice children? They do it, symbolize him as an owl. That's why the owl comes up all over the place. Now, when I was looking in the street plan of Washington, this is not in Talisman of the United States, this just caught my eye as I was looking through a Washington street map, I found this around the Congress building. There's a Congress building in the middle. And just by drawing in red pen on the roads within the Congress building complex, very obviously an owl appears. You can also see an owl on the dollar bill if you can magnify it enough. It has to be magnified very, very intensely, and then you see the owl in one of the corners. But when you look at the next shot, this is not being doctored by me in any way with a red pen. This is just a shot directly from a Washington street plan. And there you see around the Congress building the owl, Moloch, the deity going back to Babylon and this whole story I've been talking about. And he's actually sitting on top of a pyramid. A pyramid and all-seeing owl, just like the pyramid and all-seeing eye. Because the owl and the eye symbolize the same thing, this force which controls the world through these bloodlines. Also in the street plan of Washington, you find pentagrams. Symbols are not in themselves negative. The five-pointed star, the pentagram as we call it, it's not in itself negative. Just as the swastika in its original form is not negative, it was just a symbol of the sun. Other things too, probably. What the Nazis did, however, was take the swastika and turn it round to indicate the negative. It's what they call reverse symbolism in Satanism. So what they do with the pentagram, which is why it's become a satanic symbol, is to turn it upside down, so it's pointing down. Reverse symbolism. It's the same with the dove, Semiramis. To the general population, the dove equals peace, love, and all this stuff. Reverse symbolism, the dove equals death and destruction. So here we have two pentagrams in the street plan of Washington. The top one points into the Capitol building, and the one at the bottom points into the White House. And not only do they reverse the pentagram to indicate the negative, another way of doing that is to distort the pentagram so it's not in a geometrically equal pattern. Some lines are longer than others, and that's what you see here. Now, if you take the road through the middle of that White House pentagram, you might call it, and you go out the other side, very soon, just a few minutes from the White House, in a direct line with it, you find a very strange building in Washington, and it is this one. What you're looking at here is a building that looks completely out of place among the streets of Washington, the Washington environment, and that whole area. The reason is this is a particularly special building to the Brotherhood. It's got the feel of an Egyptian temple. In the middle there you see that depiction of the rising sun across the over the horizon, which is what you saw on the Washington sun chair earlier, and many other symbols of this Brotherhood are that sun coming up over the horizon or over the mountains. And on the two sides of the steps you've got their symbolic depictions of the Sphinx, etc. So what are we looking at here in this strange building just down from the White House? Well, we're looking at the Supreme Headquarters, 33rd degree Scottish Rite of Freemasonry. Because Freemasonry did not begin in the 16 and 1700s, as is claimed. That's when this strand of the Brotherhood got the name Freemasonry. What it really is a face or a mask on the one face that goes back to the ancient world. And this is where they're coming from, the ancient Egyptian Babylonian world, where these bloodlines came out of a long, long time ago. This is where they're coming from, the ancient Egyptian Babylonian world, where these bloodlines came out of a long, long time ago. Here's another more close view of that half sun coming up, and when you see it live, as it were, when you're actually there, it's a beautiful depiction of the sun. And in the back, they've got a bust of George Washington, first Freemasonic president of the United States. This is a political building, so we're told. In fact, it's a temple to a secret society, built by the Freemasons to a specific design, Congress, the Congress building. Where did it get its name from? Capitol Hill, from a sacred place of the Roman Brotherhood going way back called Capitoline Hill. And when Madeleine Albright, high priestess of this Brotherhood, became Secretary of State, and she went across on her first overseas visit to Europe, she actually went to Rome and made an official visit, what for her would have been a pilgrimage to Capitoline Hill in Rome, and that's where we get Capitol Hill from. Now, they build these buildings in specific designs. This is where you see obelisks and domes everywhere in the major cities. It's because the dome resonates and draws in female energy, and for obvious reasons, the obelisk, the phallic, draws in male energy. And so in particular places, in particular cities, in particular locations of politics or whatever, religion, you get the dome and the obelisk. So just take a look, just for a second, at that dome on a political building in Washington. And there it is again. This time, it's St. Paul's Cathedral, in the heart of the city of London, one of the epicenters of this global manipulation. And St. Paul's Cathedral was built on an ancient site of worship to the goddess Diana, and was built by Sir Christopher Wren, one of the high initiates of this secret society network, after William of Orange arrived in London to be King William III, and the whole thing epicentered in London. There is St. Paul's Cathedral. There's another view of St. Paul's Cathedral. Looks like it, but it's not. This is the Pantheon in Paris. Again, a mirror image of St. Paul's Cathedral and the Congress building, this time in the other great Brotherhood epicenter city of Paris. The obelisk, there we have the Washington Memorial, the phallic symbol of the obelisk, and this goes to again to ancient Egypt, with the story of the penis of Osiris. It was apparently lost, and Isis got another one, all that stuff they talk about. And since that time, this has become the symbol of the male energy, the male phallic. And I must say, just a brief story. These symbols are actually manifestations of thought. So what these are built to represent is what they generate in terms of energy. I was inside a massive obelisk near a place called Hebden Bridge in England, and as I was climbing the stairs, it was so big it had a stone staircase inside it, the energy around me I just felt this enormous male sexual energy, and I thought, what's going on? Especially when you get to my age, you know. And then I realized, why am I feeling this? Well, what are you walking up inside your pillock, I thought? You're walking up inside a representation of the male phallic, therefore that's the energy it generates. It's very important that we're aware of this. These are not just symbols and what have you, in a secret language alone. They generate energy. And this is why you have these in specific points in the major cities, just like the domes. So here's the Washington Monument, the biggest stone obelisk in the world, right in the center of the Washington Street Plan, down from the White House. This is what's known in London as Cleopatra's Needle. Again, like the one in Paris, it was taken from Egypt. It's an original. It was in the city of Hon or Heliopolis, the city or place of the sun, and was brought over during the reign of Queen Victoria. Again, this is on former Templar land. The Temple Bar is just across from here, where the center of the secret society network of the legal profession is based, in the former Templar land of Temple Bar. Here's, again, this 3,200-year-old obelisk in the city of Paris, from Luxor in Egypt. No accident. There's another one in Central Park, New York, I understand, as well. Here in the wholly owned Brotherhood city of Las Vegas, where they had a blank sheet of paper to start with, a blank sheet of land, they have just filled it with the symbolism of thousands of years. And here you have the big black pyramid, the casino. Again, that will be resonating energy in a certain way in that place of Las Vegas. There you have the big Sphinx, and there you have the obelisk as well. Now, one of the other things they do is that they symbolize the sun and the moon, in the sense that they put the building representing the sun, like the Arc de Triomphe, and they put next to the building what they call a reflecting pool. And the reflecting pool, this is the Lincoln Memorial in Washington here, just down from that obelisk, the reflecting pool reflects the building. In other words, the building is the sun, the water is the moon. And here's that symbolism again in Dealey Plaza this time, with the obelisk that the Freemasons put up there after Kennedy was killed. And again, it is the male phallic, the obelisk, reflected in the reflecting pool, which symbolizes the moon. They understand how these moon and sun energies can be used and manipulated, and that's one of the great areas of knowledge that has been kept from the rest of the population in the secret society network. And this goes back a very long time. Interestingly, it is this Brotherhood network that created Christianity and created Islam and all the other religions, and the biggest secret documents this in great detail. They created the religions as a prison religion and to imprison the mind of the populace, but they also built the cathedrals and the main churches, and they built them on the vortex points, on their sacred points, in a certain way. Again, I mentioned St. Paul's Cathedral was built on a former site of goddess Diana worship. The goddess Diana was one of the great goddesses of the ancient world. This is Notre Dame, Our Lady Cathedral in Paris, one of the most famous cathedrals in the world, Notre Dame. Because people thought Notre Dame, Our Lady, Mother of Jesus, it was taken as a Christian name. In fact, Our Lady is Isis, Semiramis, Diana, and these other names for the deities that the Brotherhood have worshipped over the period of thousands of years we're talking about. So look at that. That's Notre Dame, built with Templar money, Knights Templar money, to sacred geometry on a sacred vortex point. Now we'll just cross the English Channel. There's Westminster Cathedral. Could be the same building. Again, built with Templar money in that same period on a great vortex point. And you've got Big Ben to the left there, the famous clock on the Houses of Parliament, and that is a massive obelisk. And the Houses of Parliament, like Congress, are built on a sacred vortex point. The political buildings are actually temples. Interestingly, this is on Notre Dame Cathedral, and these are the gargoyles. Now, when you look at gargoyles, what are they? They are depictions of reptiles, reptilian forms, often with wings. bizarre and amazing as it may seem, and I'm the first to agree with that, this is how ancient and modern these reptilians are described in ancient texts and by people who've seen them, and again, The Biggest Secret documents this in enormous detail. So on the cathedrals and on the stately homes of the British and European aristocracy, you find these reptiles. You also find them on or around a modern airport, Denver Airport. Why are gargoyles in Denver Airport? A modern airport built controversially and for an enormous amount of money in more recent years. It just so happens that those that research into these things, into the extraterrestrial influence on Earth, have designated that, and has some of the people involved in its construction, as a reptilian base, an Anunnaki base, actually in Colorado. In Dealey Plaza, where they killed Kennedy, one of the buildings of Dealey Plaza has gargoyles all over it. Why? Because this is symbolic of the bloodlines and where the bloodlines actually come from and what they're controlled by. This is a depiction 5,000 years BC in the Ubaid culture, the one that just preceded Sumer in what we now call Iraq, and this was a depiction of one of their gods. And again, the reptilian, lizard-type humanoid figure, ancient and modern, keeps coming up again and again, and you can see it also in the states, in the coats of arms and the family coats of arms of these aristocratic bloodlines in Europe. Okay, another indication of how this symbolism works and where they're coming from. This is George Washington. In the last century, they decided they didn't have a decent statue of George, so instead of getting an American to produce one, they ordered it from Italy, from Florence. And when it arrived on the dockside, people were staggered, because here was George, the first president of the United States, depicted naked from the waist up, with this cloth over his Bill Clinton's, and then pointing up one arm, pointing down the other. What's going on? Unless you realize where these people are coming from, it's inexplicable. Well, if you just hold that in your mind, arm up, arm down, naked from the waist up, and then Bill Clinton's covered in a piece of cloth, well, this is where it's coming from. This is the ancient depiction of the compilation of the negative force symbol that the Templars worshipped, or the high-level Templars worshipped anyway, called Baphomet. And this is why they depicted George Washington in that way. Now, the skull and bones is a symbol you can keep picking up when you're trying to read the secret language also. Skull and bones is a symbol you can keep picking up when you're trying to read the secret language also. The skull and bones was on the flag of the ships of the Templars, which is why it just got turned into the pirate flag in children's stories and stuff like that. And there was another organization called the Russell Group, the Russell Company, the Russell Trust, and they made a fortune. It's one of the bloodline families in America. They made a fortune running opium to China for the British during the Opium Wars, when Britain took over China by getting the population hooked on drugs, which is what's happening to the global population today, just a bigger version of it. And on the flags of the ships of the Russell Company running these drugs was the skull and crossbones. And so it's no surprise that it was the Russell Trust that created one of the most infamous secret societies in America, called the Skull and Bones Society. This is a Freemasonic apron from the last century with the skull and bones on. Why? Because the Freemasons came out of the Templars, and the Templars used the symbol of the skull and bones. In various paintings, not just the one I talked about earlier, the Leonardo da Vinci depiction of the Last Supper, but also in many others, you see the symbolism in the painting. This is one called The Ambassadors, which is in London on display. And at the bottom there, you see a very strange kind of, I don't know what it is. When you say to people what you think this is, they go, well, I don't know what that is. It's strange. What is it? What's he doing there? But if you look at it from a particular angle, and it has to be from a particular angle, then you start to see what that is in that painting, and it is a skull. And the skull and bones is a constant symbol through these thousands of years of this brotherhood. This is a coin from a a legal fraternity in America. There's the skull and bones again. There's the owl at the top, Moloch or Molech. And these symbols keep recurring whenever you're looking at a brotherhood organization. And this is the headquarters of the Skull and Bones Society in Connecticut. It's right next to the Yale University campus. And the Skull and Bones Society, created by the Russell Trust, pulls in 15 very highly selected students every year from the bloodline families, and they go on, in terms of the ratio, in very large numbers to enter the positions of power in America, both in front of the camera and behind the scenes where the real power is. The most famous Skull and Bones member today is George Bush, former President of the United States. His father, Prescott Bush, one of the people who through the Harriman organization helped to fund Hitler, was also a Skull and Bones member. It's very much a bloodline family operation. And it's part of a deeply, deeply satanic black magic network right across the world. On the other side of that coin, by the way, just incidentally, you see the scales of justice. The scales of justice, you know that lady who kind of stands there holding the scales on the court buildings of the world and stuff? That's actually a goddess from ancient Egypt, again, called Maat, or Maat, spelled M-A-A-T, and that's what that is. It's nothing to do with justice. It's another brotherhood symbol. Again, you see them everywhere. You go in any Freemasonic temple or secret society building, and you'll find, again, the black and white squares on the floor. And this is not just Freemasonic. Again, you go back into the ancient world, you see the same thing reoccurring. The floor is black and white squares. This is a policeman from England, and I've noticed in America you see the same thing, the black and white squares on the uniform and what have you. That is to indicate the Freemason secret society, although most policemen don't realize this. Now, this is Westminster Abbey, and the same you'll find in Notre Dame and these other so-called great cathedrals of the world. The floor is black and white squares. Why? Because the same brotherhood that uses this symbolism built the things and controls them to this very day. When you get into the transnational corporations, again you see the symbolism, because as we'll come to as we go along in a few minutes, all these apparently unconnected areas of our lives, banking, transnational corporations, oil companies, connecting to the same group, the same controlling force, and so all over the major companies of the world, banks and what have you, you see the brotherhood symbols. This is Arco, Atlantic Richfield Oil Company, and there its symbol, the pyramid with a capstone missing, looked at from above. One of the classic symbols. Chevron. What you need to do to see the symbolism of this is to see this not as two one-dimensional ticks, but as two three-dimensional boxes, one on top of another, which is very symbolic in the secret language. One square equals we control all that is right, all that is just, all that is fair. This is where we get everyday phrases from, like a square deal or being fair and square. One square on top of another square in any form means we control all that is right and all that is wrong, all that is positive, all that is negative, all that is just, all that is unjust, all that is this, all that is that. We control everything. And so that's what that's saying. And so appropriately, when you look in the main lobby of the Houses of Parliament in Britain, you find the two squares, one laid on the other, the so-called eight-pointed star, and that says we control everything in the Brotherhood secret language. Also, as I travel the world, the number of times I see police forces have their badge in the center of two squares laid on top of each other. This is Sussex Police in Britain, but I've seen it all over the world, the same thing. Very appropriate. We control everything. One of the most important strands of this bloodline, going back to the Anunnaki of the ancient world and this hybrid race that was created, is France. And particularly an area of France and near across the German border called Lorraine, or Alsace-Lorraine. And the House of Lorraine has been a real home for the purest of these reptile Martian or reptile human bloodlines. And the House of Lorraine developed this symbol, the double cross. See that there on this guy. Double cross. That's where we get the phrase being double crossed, being manipulated. How appropriate. And so you take the double cross, and we see it in the modern world in Exxon, the Rockefeller-controlled or guided oil company, with the double cross in the symbol. Again, to the uninitiated, people would look at that and say, oh, it's just a symbol, mate. But actually, to the initiates who run this show, it actually means something. A Texaco oil company, esoteric symbols again. The circle, the pentagram, and the T-cross of Freemasonry, the Tau cross it's also called. Again, symbols are talking to the subconscious. When you look at that symbol, you can't hear words coming off it in a conscious way, but it's actually resonating an energy that talks to the subconscious. This is why advertisers who are in this knowledge stream manipulate advertising in a way that they use certain colors, certain phrases, certain symbols to talk to the subconscious and get us to then buy the product in a conscious way, thinking we've made the decision when we've been stimulated from a much deeper level. Subliminal advertising is massive. Amoco, the oil company with the lighted torch. Again, the same symbol that keeps recurring all over the place. The British royal family, the Windsors, are one of the most identifiable of these reptile human bloodlines that have been controlling the world increasingly powerfully for so long. In the ancient world, on caves and underground areas in Cappadocia, an ancient Phoenician center, you find the splayed cross on the wall, what we call now the Maltese cross. And so, appropriately, on the crown that crowns the monarch of England, this is the crown on which, or with which, the Queen of England was crowned back in the 50s, 1953, you see, again, the Maltese cross, and that keeps coming up again and again. Also on that was the fleur-de-lis. The fleur-de-lis is a symbol of Nimrod. Here are some of the sticks the Queen holds, you know, in the ceremonies and stuff, scepters they call them. And once again, you see the Maltese crosses and the doves. The dove, Queen Semiramis, the deity of Babylon, on the various scepters and bits and pieces that they use in their royal ceremonies and regalia and heraldry and stuff in Britain, because this to an initiate means something very significant. This is the Dutch royal family. Again, you've got the splayed cross, the Maltese cross, and the Dutch royal family are the same bloodline as the British royal family, because the royal families of Europe are one bloodline, just offshoots of it. And all the surviving royal families of Europe are blood related to William of Orange, William III, who helped this scam to really motor when he became King of England, as I talked about earlier. And one of the members of the Dutch royal family is a guy called Prince Bernhard of the Netherlands, and he'll come up as we go along, good mate of Prince Philip, both knowingly manipulating this agenda I'm talking about. So we go to the Nazis. Now, of course, the Allies were against the Nazis. I read that somewhere too. But it's funny, the same symbolism comes up. On this Nazi, you've got the Maltese cross. It was a big Nazi symbol. You've got the flying disc, which was a symbol of the sun in Egypt and other ancient cultures. And as we go along here, here's the classic Heil Hitler symbol. What was that? It was a symbol from a ritual of a secret society, a satanic secret society, called the Order of the Golden Dawn, involving a guy called Aleister Crowley, which was working through both the Allies, the British, and the Nazis during the Second World War. Hitler symbol. What was that? It was a symbol from a ritual of a secret society, a satanic secret society, called the Order of the Golden Dawn, involving a guy called Aleister Crowley, which was working through both the Allies, the British, and the Nazis during the Second World War. And here's a guy who's kind of, he collects them, this fella. Another Nazi, look, he's got the Maltese cross, he's got the skull and bones, he's got the reverse swastika, the sun symbol of the Phoenicians, and he's got the eagle, which is symbolic of the phoenix, the sunbird of the Phoenicians and the Egyptians. And this is why you see eagles everywhere, in coats of arms and national badges, not least the United States. Here it is. The original, apparently, coat of arms of the United States actually had a phoenix until it was switched to the eagle. And if you count the number of arrows there, the number of feathers, the number of letters in that name, and all this massive symbolism, they all add up to key esoteric numbers like 13, 9, etc., etc., because initiates created this. Every so often there are certain events and certain people which pull in all strands of the various elements I've talked about so far over these hours, and the assassination, because that's what it was, of Diana, Princess of Wales, had all these elements of bloodlines, of royalty, of secret societies, and of the symbolism of the secret societies in the actual assassination itself. In The Biggest Secret, I've gone into this in tremendous detail in one chapter in particular, and there is a video documentary planned of this Diana assassination and the background to it. Maybe it will even have been done and be available by the time you see this. So I'm not going to go into the Diana thing in great detail here because it's done elsewhere, but I just want to go through a few things. From close confidence of Diana, it's very clear that she realized after a while that she had been pulled in for a specific purpose. She used to call herself the Windsor brood mare. The Spencer family is an ancient bloodline which is interbred with many of the aristocratic families of Britain, of Europe, and of America. Spencers are distant cousins, for instance, of the Rockefellers. And she realized that they'd drawn her into the Windsor web because they wanted her genes. They wanted to fuse the Windsor genes with the Spencer genes to produce another version of a genetic hybrid with a particular genetic structure. And from the very start, it's clear when you look at the story and the information that she was pulled in and identified for this from a very, very early age. She was actually brought up on the Sandringham estate and knew the Queen and Prince Charles and stuff from a very early age. The Windsors are, this is the Queen here, an ancient reptile human bloodline. And I was kind of surprised, although my research was going that way, to be told that by a confidant of Diana that her nickname for the Windsors was the lizards or the reptiles. And she used to say, in all seriousness, they're not human. And she knew far more about this background by the time she died than people in the public domain would ever realize. And she'd certainly realized what the Windsors were about and where they came from. Now, this is a guy who has been going around saying that Diana and his son Dodi were assassinated. I haven't got time to go into why someone might feel it acceptable for their son to die in a road crash, but if you read The Biggest Secret, you can see some of the background to this. If we start judging whether something is possible by what we would do, we're going to lose the plot, because not everyone thinks like everyone else. And when you look at the background to Diana's assassination, the person that had complete control of her security and her movements in the crucial period, days leading up to it, but particularly on that specific day, was Mohammed Al-Fayed. And when you look at his background, as I've said in The Biggest Secret, you know when Mohammed Al-Fayed is trying to kid you, trying to tell you something that's not true, because his lips are moving. It's the way you can see it, because this guy has lied his way through his whole economic and business career. And he's done exactly that over Diana's assassination. There was a guy that I've mentioned a number of times in my books called Tony Blair. Tony Blair was brought through by this brotherhood to become Prime Minister of Britain. And I have a contact who, for a long time, performed satanic ceremonies in which ritual human sacrifice took place of children and of adults. And one of the key places, which I've talked about in my books, is a place known as the Castle of Darkness in Belgium. In the late 80s, she says that at a ritual sacrifice that she performed was the Queen of England, which she's done sacrifices for many times, the Queen Mother, Tony Blair, who was then just a lower-ranked politician, and Mohammed al-Fayed, father of Dodi. And yet in the public arena we get this royal family on one side and Dodi Fayed's father, Mohammed al-Fayed, on the other, when in fact they lock into the same controlling force. And he had control of her movements on the crucial day. There's the ISIS symbol of ancient Egypt, very close to that headgear that he posed with for a British newspaper. Now again, if you're going to kind of follow the symbolism and the background to Diana's assassination, you have to go back into the ancient world. You can pick one of these one of the pure key reptile human bloodlines up in Troy, ancient Troy, which is what we now call Turkey. You can follow this bloodline through the Caucasus Mountains and into Europe and into what we call France. In fact, France is named after these people. They call themselves the Sicambrian Franks. And they had a royal offshoot, and eventually became known by this royal offshoot, called the Merovingians. And the Merovingians set up the city we call Paris. You're looking at a part of the modern Paris, which is was the place that they established the original Paris. And they named the city after one of the people involved in the Trojan Wars, a guy called Prince Paris. And there's Notre Dame, Our Lady, Diana, Semiramis, Isis Cathedral. And this was where Paris kind of came out of with the Merovingians many, many centuries ago. Now, these Merovingians, Franks, Sicambrian Franks, worshipped the goddess Diana, who was one of the great goddesses of the ancient world. And they built underground chambers just outside the original Paris to do their sacrifices and ceremonies to the goddess Diana. Of course, as Paris has got bigger and bigger, the area of that sacrifice area for the goddess Diana is now modern Paris. And it's still an underground chamber. That point is called the Pont d'Alma Tunnel, where Diana died in 1997. And Diana is actually blood related to the Merovingian line. This is the Ritz Hotel, owned by Mohammed al-Fayed, and all around the square, it's called the Vendome, you see at first floor level depictions in gold of that symbol I talked about a long time ago, the circle, the cross, and the sun on the center. And it comes from one of the French kings, one of the Louis, who was known as the Sun King, who built the Palace of Versailles. And in the back of the Palace of Versailles, in the grounds, is a depiction of the goddess Diana, which this aristocratic bloodline network very much focus on as one of their deities. Someone said, this is the Kennedy assassination here, something very true. When you're trying to understand who was behind an assassination, look at who had the power to remove the security at the crucial time. Because he said assassinations don't just happen, they are allowed to happen. And when you look at the footage taken on a camera, a video camera, by a member of the public when Rabin, the Israeli Prime Minister, was assassinated, it's extraordinary. You have the line of soldiers lined up to protect Rabin as he came to his car, and in among them is the guy who killed him. As Rabin appears on this video, extraordinary sight, the soldiers just walk backwards, leaving the assassin on his own. Rabin walks past him, thank you very much, good night. And it's the same with the Kennedy assassination and so many others. This is the point where Kennedy was hit. This is Kennedy's car at the front. There's nobody on it. And yet you look at the car behind, which doesn't carry the President of the United States. There's 4 security guards and 2 outriders. If they'd have been there, of course, Kennedy could not have been killed by a bullet from outside because he was so well protected. But the whole thing was removed, the security, to allow it to happen. And it was the same in Paris on that night. This is the back entrance to the Ritz Hotel where the car left because it was decided by Mohammed al-Fayed on the phone to his son Dodi from England that although she'd had a certain level of security all day, a Mercedes and a backup car, a Range Rover, that was suddenly at the crucial time going to be removed, and another Mercedes was brought in with no backup car and no security, apart from the Trevor Rees-Jones, the bodyguard in the front seat. So suddenly, classic assassination, security is removed to allow it to happen. In the car that was driven away was this guy, Henri Paul. Classic assassination, security is removed to allow it to happen. In the car that was driven away was this guy, Henri Paul, who's been the fall guy for it, or blamed on him. He is an asset, or was an asset, of British and French intelligence, had been for a long time, and he had 4 bank accounts which had considerable amounts of money paid in the period leading up to that, not necessarily for what happened to Diana, but because he was an asset of British and French intelligence, which is the same organization. And to really appreciate how this could be done, you need to appreciate something called trauma-based mind control. During the last war in the concentration camps of Germany, in fact, way back this has been known about, but particularly during the last war, they started to perfect the manipulation of a natural mechanism in the mind that shuts out trauma. What they did was to understand that if you could systematically traumatize someone, their mind would shut out the memory of it and create an amnesic barrier, which would be disconnected from the rest of the mind. This is what happens when people have a major road accident and they can't remember what happened. It's because the amnesic barrier has been created to shut out trauma, so we don't keep reliving the horror. Good thing. But they realized that if you could do that systematically and start with children, particularly before the age of 5 and 6, you could turn their minds into a honeycomb of self-contained compartments, none of which was aware of the other's existence. This guy was what they call a multiple, Henri Paul, which in their mind is broken up into different compartments, and so through trigger words and what have you, and trigger sentences, hypnotic keys, one amnesic barrier becomes the conscious level. That experiences something or is programmed to do something, and then he's pushed back and another one's pulled forward. It's actually got to the point where, amazing as it may seem, you can be drunk in one compartment and completely sober in the other, which is interesting in relation to what happened if you look at the story of Henri Paul. Once the programming is in there, and in the biggest secret, I put incredible documentation and background to this and what happened, and trauma-based mind control and how it creates assassins and people going crazy with guns to justify taking guns out of circulation, all this stuff. When you look at the background, all that is necessary is to program the guy, push that programming back into the mind, and that will stay there at the subconscious level until some trigger comes in. When that trigger word or trigger action or whatever is said or done, that programming is activated. So you can be in normal mode and be very normal and no problem and nothing, oh, I've never noticed anything different about old Henry that night. Trigger word, bang, programming, you're like a robot. And what gives away this is the fact that the car hit the 13th pillar. If you read The Biggest Secret, you'll see the incredible obsession with symbolism that this brotherhood has. I've been to Paris, and in that tunnel, the Pont d'Alma tunnel, there's 30-odd of these pillars. It hit the 13th. The 13 is the number that reoccurs again and again and again and again, constantly over thousands and thousands of years in all these different brotherhood groups and all these different secret societies. And it relates in part to the 1 and 12, that symbol again of the sun and the 12 months, the 12 areas of the zodiac. So, all it would have needed, because the guy was missing for 3 hours that night, was the trigger word, or the trigger, to activate the programming, and Henri Paul suddenly goes into whatever he was programmed to do. Now, where they were going that night, and this is agreed by everyone, is from the Ritz Hotel, which is numbered 1 on this map, down to the Champs-Élysées and to almost the Arc de Triomphe, where Dodi Fayed had his flat. When they went earlier in the day, the car went down to the Place de la Concorde, went up the Champs-Élysées to his flat, which is right next to that circle you see there. This is the quickest way from the Ritz to the apartment of Dodi Fayed. But not that occasion did he go that way. Henri Paul went around to the Place de la Concorde, and suddenly, instead of going down the quickest way, went on to this dual carriageway that goes alongside the River Seine. He went at an increasingly fast speed and then went down into the Pont d'Alma tunnel. Now, why would he go that way? Some people say, well, he was going round to miss the traffic or whatever. But the key thing is, by going the long way to the apartment, it took him through the Pont d'Alma tunnel. It took him through this ancient sacrificial site to the goddess Diana. And what does Pont d'Alma mean? Pont d'Alma means passage or bridge of the moon goddess. And Diana, in Brotherhood symbolism, is a symbol of the moon, a moon goddess. Another interesting thing is that bodyguards, when they're in the front seat of a car, they never wear a seatbelt because they're looking after their clients and they need to react quickly. What happened with Trevor Rees-Jones, the bodyguard, is that he never had a seatbelt on when the car left the Ritz, which is normal practice. When he got to the Place de la Concorde, one of the photographers chasing the car got a shot of the bodyguard, Trevor Rees-Jones, still no seatbelt. Literally a minute later, probably less, when the car crashed in the tunnel, Trevor Rees-Jones had a seatbelt on. The only person in the car who did, because the people in the back, Dodi Fayed and Diana, did not. So either Trevor Rees-Jones knew what was coming but didn't tell his clients, or he realized at some point there was a danger going on here and didn't tell his clients. This is the Place de la Concorde, and there is the obelisk, the 3,200-year-old Luxor obelisk, which was about a minute's drive that night from the crash, and Diana went round there on the way to the scene. This is Trevor Rees-Jones. When asked why he put his seatbelt on, he says he doesn't remember, and maybe we'll never know, but it's got to be one or the other. When the car came down to the tunnel here at the Pont d'Alma, it's a series of crossroads, and that's very, very significant, because these deities who are symbolic of the moon and various energies, they're broken up into different polarities. You've got Diana, which is the positive moon energy, and then you've got the negative force, which is called Icke, which is the goddess of the crossroads, and she's symbolized by crossroads and all over the world. The Hecate satanic symbolism can be seen in the ceremonies and what have you. And so here we have a situation now where Diana, goddess of the moon, is taken into an ancient sacrificial site to the goddess Diana, dies in a tunnel which is called Bridge or Passage of the Moon Goddess, and is also covered with crossroads to the goddess Hecate, which is the malevolent symbol of the moon energy. This is the Pont d'Alma tunnel. It's very short, and I've been through it, and they keep telling me in the media it's very dangerous. I didn't really see that myself. And it's very close to the Arc de Triomphe, which is another obelisk symbol. This is the 13th pillar, and there's no way that car hit the 13th pillar, given the obsession with symbolism of this brotherhood, unless it was meant to happen. I've talked to people who are experts in this mind control, who work to deprogram people who have been mind controlled in this way. And I said to them, is it possible to mind control a driver on a subconscious level to go into that tunnel and just whack the 13th pillar? Because, of course, in the conscious level, you'd say, come on, it's not possible. And everyone has said, absolutely, for this reason. The conscious level has a certain feeling of time. So going into the tunnel at 60, 70, 80 miles an hour and then hitting the 13th pillar, you must be joking. But the subconscious level has a completely different perception of time. 60, 70 miles an hour to that is walking pace. Therefore, the programming goes in at the subconscious level, making that hit the 13th pillar at speed. Piece of cake, according to these experts I've spoken to. Diana actually survived the crash. All reports say that. But instead of being taken to hospital, where she could have got treatment that could have saved her life, she was held in that tunnel for a very, very long time. Medical experts outside of France have said it's ridiculous how long it took. About 95 minutes from the crash to get her to hospital, by which time she was clinically dead. Between the Ritz and the tunnel are 17 of these things, traffic cameras, which are filming the road which the car passed down. Had they been on that night, we wouldn't be standing here saying, well, I wonder what happened, could have been this, could have been that. We'd have seen it. All 17 were switched off in the period it took the car to get from the Ritz to the tunnel. Not only that, people who were tuning in that night in Paris to the police frequencies, as some people do, have reported that the police frequencies in central Paris were also switched off in the period it took the car to get to the tunnel. Just a coincidence, nothing to worry about. Just a coincidence, nothing to worry about. This is the shot that that particular camera would have had. The Mercedes came in on this side of the road, and had that camera been on, everyone would have known by now what happened. They could have seen it, but it was switched off, or at least we're told it was. And so we have a situation in which Diana was held in that place for all that time, and she was clinically dead by the time she left it. And the question has been, even from people who've said, yes, it was an accident, why did they do that? Because, according to the strict and obsessional symbolic ritual of this brotherhood, she had to die in that underground chamber on the site of ancient Diana worship and sacrifice to Diana. There's no way she was going to be allowed to leave the tunnel until she was dead, and so they kept her there all that time when most doctors, as some have pointed out, would have had her at a hospital as quick as possible, and she'd still be alive today, almost certainly. So the Diana story is just full of endless symbolism, and I'm just skipping the surface here. The detail is absolutely mind-blowing. This is the top of the Pont d'Alma tunnel, and as I mentioned earlier, there is the depiction of the flame held by the Statue of Liberties in Paris and in New York, standing on a black pentagram, the classic satanic symbol. And that is where they take the flowers and stuff now. This area of Paris with the Eiffel Tower, the River Seine, is an ancient sacred site to this brotherhood. And it's absolutely no coincidence that this is where they brought Diana to die that night. Indeed, when you go through her life in general, you find that the symbolism of the goddess Diana comes up again and again. When she married Prince Charles, they married her in St. Paul's Cathedral. St. Paul's Cathedral is on an ancient site of goddess Diana worship. And when they brought her coffin out of Paris, it wasn't with the Union Jack and the flag of the country, it was with the flag of the royal family, full of these old symbols of the sun going back to the ancient world. And as I've pointed out many times, and with a lot of supporting evidence, the British royal family were definitely involved in her murder. Interestingly, when the crash happened, this guy comes into focus. This is Diana's brother, Earl Spencer. And there's one or two questions I'd like to ask him, really, because the symbolism of the goddess Diana in the ancient world related again and again to the tree grove, which is the sacred place to the goddess Diana. That's where they used to worship her, in the tree grove. Lakes and islands. Those three things keep reoccurring again and again and again in the stories of the goddess Diana. This is where they put her grave, on an island, in the tree grove, in the middle of a lake on the Althorpe estate, the Spencer estate. And those decisions, at least on the surface, were made by Earl Spencer. He also said in a BBC television interview that after the crash he had a dream in which he was told to put 4 black swans on the lake around the grave. And the next day he said he called his estate manager and asked, where do I get 4 black swans? And his estate manager apparently replied, according to the official story, you've heard then. You've heard what? we've just been given 4 black swans. Okay, well, the pigs are filling the room again. I don't really accept that. What is the symbolism of 4 black swans? First of all, when you look into the mind control programs, the swan is very symbolic to the mind control programs. But there's another one. Just take Swan Lake. Swan Lake, in which the white swan, symbolic of the positive, was killed by the black swan, symbolic of the negative. And here you had the positive Diana energy killed by this brotherhood, and the 4 black swans on the lake are tremendous symbolism, occult symbolism of that negative force overcoming the positive. And in the Althorpe estate now you have this, what you might call temple to Diana, and on many of the aristocratic estates and stately homes of England that carry these reptile human bloodlines, you find either temples to the goddess Diana in the grounds or areas of the stately home handed over to the goddess Diana. So this lady was a great example of the way that people are not just assassinated, but are assassinated in a way that follows ancient ritual. Because ritual is very powerful. If you do things in a certain ritual way, it generates a much more powerful energy than if you just killed someone in a straightforward way. But as I say, in The Biggest Secret, I go into this in enormous detail, and the symbolism is just stunning of this event. Okay, we're in the modern world. We've come a long way over thousands of years. This brotherhood, as it came out of the Near and Middle East into Europe and then through the British Empire across the world. And we're now at the point where the control of the globe is possible. And we're also at a point, a crossroads, where we can choose to take the road of freedom, or we can choose to stay as we are and allow this agenda to unfold and further imprison, in a most extreme way, the human race in the next few years. Just a choice. We take that choice, this is gone. But we need to make that choice and do something about it. The aim of this agenda over this long period of time has been to create this structure. And don't take my word for it, just look around the world. It's unfolding now. This is not a theory or a prophecy. It's happening on CNN when you turn on every day. You're seeing it unfold. It is to have a world government which would control a world central bank, a world currency, a world army, and a microchip population. The microchip population is already being introduced. Under that structure of world government, the army, incidentally, the world army is designed to be NATO, gathering more and more countries and then becoming the world army by stealth. Under that world government is a European Union, which is now with a single bank and a single currency and very much in place. The American Union, the America's version of the European Union. The European Union came out of a free trade area called the Common Market, the EEC. The American Union is designed to evolve out of NAFTA, another free trade area, North American Free Trade Agreement. And in 1994, APEC, another free trade area, was created in the East and the Australia area, and that is designed to evolve into the Pacific Union. Under that is designed to come nation states and regions, and then the people, with no power whatsoever to control their own destiny, because the major decisions are made at these higher levels of power, particularly the world level. The microchip is being suggested all over the world. This is a guy at Reading University in England who was microchipped as part of a kind of experiment, but it's not really an experiment. All over the world in our lives now, that we're being prepared to take the microchip. People on one level think it's about electronic tagging and it's about knowing where people are, and that's okay, that's on one level of it. But it's more than that. The guy I talked about very early on in this video series, the guy with the patch on his chest who works for the CIA against his will, he was telling me, and other people have done too, what the microchip can really do. And if we allow ourselves to be microchipped on the basis of, oh, well, it's better than having credit cards and money, that's what the cashless society is about. It's about getting people to be microchipped. And we'll never lose our child again if we microchip them at birth. All this stuff's being suggested now. But he said, you know, when people are microchipped, they are giving external control of their physical health, their emotions, and their mental processes, their mental faculties, their mental perception to whoever controls the microchip. And if everyone's microchipped, you suddenly got mass control on the end of a button, almost, of the population. That's the idea. That's what we're being drawn into as part of this agenda as it unfolds. And if we say no to one thing only and then go back to watching The Price is Right, let us say no to the microchip, because then at least we've got a bit of a chance here. The United Nations symbol came out of the Freemasonic symbolism also. The United Nations was created to be a focus for the centralization of global power, like that world government on that earlier slide. The sections in that target type symbol of the United Nations, there's 33. Just happens to be 33 degrees of the Scottish Rite of Freemasonry. And it's kind of nicely framed, isn't it, with those leaves. I wonder where that came from. Oh, yes, I remember now. It's a Freemasonic symbol, again, transferred to the United Nations. These symbols of these various levels of control, the European Union has 12 stars in a circle, etc. They're all esoteric symbols. Now this... I guess of everything I've said so far, this next few minutes are going to be the most important, because I'm talking about the most powerful means of mass manipulation which has been played, this card, for thousands of years, and we're still falling for it. And it is this more than anything that's advanced this agenda to centralization of global power. I call it problem, reaction, solution. It works like this. You want to bring something in here, centralization of power, more power for the police, more power for security agencies, whatever, and you know that if you do it openly and honestly, there's going to be a reaction against it. We're not having this. This is a global fascist state. Go away. We're not standing for this. This is outrageous. That's what you're going to get if you do it openly. So you don't. What you do is you create a problem. We're not having this. This is a global fascist state. Go away. We're not standing for this. This is outrageous. That's what you're going to get if you do it openly. So you don't. What you do is you create a problem here. Could be society breaking down, so there is more crime, so people get in fear of being mugged and being burgled. Could be war, it could be a terrorist bomb, an economic collapse, whatever. And you create a problem, but you get someone else to be blamed for it. You get a Lee Harvey Oswald, you get these patsies, as they call them in America, who are blamed for events that they weren't involved in. You then get the people in general, by the way that you report your problem, to react by demanding you do something. This can't go on, do something. What are they going to do about it? And at that point, those who covertly created the problem and got that reaction, something must be done, then openly offer the solutions to the problems they have themselves created. Problem, reaction, solution. Who benefited from the Oklahoma bomb? Not the people of Oklahoma, not the people who died and lost children and relatives in that bomb. One group of people, and one group of people only, benefited from Oklahoma. Anyone who wanted to centralize power even further in America. Because anti-terrorism bills went through Congress that took away basic freedoms from Americans purely and only because of that bomb. And as independent bomb experts and explosive experts have said, that fuel fertilizer device in the Ryder truck could not possibly have done that damage. It had to be done by high-tech devices on some of the pillars inside the building. So problem, reaction, solution is the classic means of advancing this agenda and getting the population to demand you do it, even though they don't know the agenda exists. And the Second World War, like the First World War, were global examples of this. As I've shown in my books like And the Truth Shall Set You Free and The Biggest Secret, come to that, the Second World War was the creation of a brotherhood, a global elite, that was funding all sides, that had control of the leaders of all sides, and just played them off against each other to create a war, a problem, which then had a solution. As again, myself and many other researchers have shown, Soviet communism was funded from Wall Street and London. The Nazis were funded from Wall Street and London, through the Bank of England and through the German subsidiaries of American and British multinational corporations, not least the Rockefeller Standard Oil. The front men of the war were Joseph Stalin in Russia, front man for this brotherhood. You had Winston Churchill in England, whose image left us by conventional history is an absolute farce. This guy was a man of war, among many other things. In America, you had one of the classic frontmen of the 20th century for this brotherhood, Franklin Delano Roosevelt, comes from one of the elite aristocratic French bloodlines. In Germany, you had Adolf Hitler, who was put in there by a network of secret societies, the Thule Society, the Vril Society, the Edelweiss Society, that locked into this global brotherhood. And they were funded by American loans and in the way that I've just talked about. So you create two sides. Incidentally, again, sun cycles, numerology, certain years, certain things happen. You look at 1933. 1933, the number of things that happened in that year. That's when the pyramid and all-seeing eye went on the dollar bill. That's when Roosevelt stole the gold from the American people. That's when Hitler came to power. That's when Roosevelt came to power. No accident. All by design. And then you get two sides and you play them off against each other in a war. And from the war, at the end of the Second World War, in such a few years, the human race was mentally, physically, emotionally, and mentally wiped. Exhausted. And in that mode, we are putty in the hands. What did people say? This can't go on. Something must be done. What are they going to do about it? What do they do about it? The United Nations, European Union, centralization of power, then we won't have another war. As I've shown in my books, documents exist that show that the Second World War was planned as the First World War was ending, probably before that. And if anyone thinks that it's not possible for a few to control the world, you're looking at it. How many people in Britain, America, Germany, Australia, South Africa, France, all these different countries, how many of those people wanted to go to war in the First World War? Hardly any of them. They want to be at home with their families, seeing their kids grow up. So why were they there? They were there because the pyramid structure and the hierarchy in this country persuaded its population they had to fight the people in this country. The little hierarchy in this country persuaded their population they had to fight this country, and these two hierarchies locked into one hierarchy, which was pulling strings of all sides. And there was a song in the 60s by a guy called Donovan, sang by a guy called Donovan, which went like this, which sums up where we're at with this. It went, he's 5'2" and he's 6'4". He fights with missiles and with spears. He's all of 31 and he's only 17. He's been a soldier for 1,000 years. He's a Catholic, a Hindu, an atheist, a Jain, a Buddhist and a Baptist and a Jew. And he knows he shouldn't kill, and he knows he always will. Killing for me, my friend, and me for you. And he's fighting for Canada, he's fighting for France, he's fighting for the USA. And he's fighting for the Russians, and he's fighting for Japan. And he thinks we'll put an end to war this way. And he's fighting for democracy, he's fighting for the Reds. He says it's for the peace of all. He's the one who must decide who's to live and who's to die, and he never sees the writing on the wall. But without him, how could Hitler have condemned him at Laval? Without him, Caesar would have stood alone. He's the one who gives his body as a weapon of the war, and without him, all this killing can't go on. He's the universal soldier, and he really is to blame. His orders come from far away no more. They come from here and there and you and me, and brothers and sisters, can't you see? This is not the way we put the end to war. And that sums up a very simple truth. When we stop playing the game, there is no game. The few can only control the world and manipulate wars if we fall for it, because we fight them and they start them. And when they've started them and we fought them, they recreate the world in the image that they want. So we went from global elite controlling both sides, conflict, United Nations, European Union, in both world wars. Power was in far fewer hands at the end of the war than it was at the start, and that was the reason for the war. Another problem, reaction, solution, which I'll talk briefly about, that is going to be played in the next few years, it would look like, maybe even sooner than that, is the idea there's some extraterrestrial invasion. These so-called flying saucers have been around for a long time. They're flown by humans. Been around for a long time. It's a very straightforward technology. But if you, going back to that knowledge, ignorance pyramid at the start, if you keep people in ignorance of what's possible, when they see things flying around that they don't believe humans can create, then they think extraterrestrial. And there's a scam being played here in which, while these extraterrestrial created and connected bloodlines have been running the world and still are all these thousands of years, that we're going to be persuaded that there's some extraterrestrial invasion coming in. And what will that justify? Centralization of global government, global army, and all these different things. And that's being played now. We're being prepared for it with more and more of these extraterrestrial stories coming out through things like X-Files, made by Fox Television, owned by Rupert Murdoch, which is owned by this Brotherhood. Things like Independence Day, made by 20th Century Fox, owned by Rupert Murdoch, who is owned by this Brotherhood. Things like Alien Resurrection, made by 20th Century Fox, owned by Rupert Murdoch, who is owned by this Brotherhood, and so on and so forth. So problem, reaction, solution happens on many, many levels. And if we keep reacting, something must be done. Oh my goodness me, save me. This will just go on. We have to ask, I would suggest, a very simple question when these things happen. Who benefits? Who benefits from me believing what I'm being asked to believe about this event? And if who benefits, and invariably it does, anyone who wants to centralize power in the world, we should do a lot of thinking before we jump in and say, do it, anything, to change the situation we're in. Alongside problem, reaction, solution is another technique. I call it the stepping stones technique. James Madison once said, I believe there are more instances of the abridgment of the freedom of the people by gradual and silent encroachments of those in power than by violent and sudden usurpations. And what that is saying in simple terms is if you want to go from here to there, you know if you go in one jump, people are going to go, what's going on? What's going on? So what you do is you do it in little steps, each step projected as totally unconnected to the others, and suddenly you're here, and when people look back, they say, my goodness me, where did this come from? The European Union has been created like that. You join a free trade area, you end up in a centralized fascist state. This is the structure throughout these thousands of years that I've been talking about, which has allowed this scam to go on. You have the elite, the Brotherhood elite, because, you know, even when the Freemasons and these secret societies, the vast majority of them haven't got a clue this is going on. They'll be as surprised at this as anybody. These secret societies are compartmentalized fiercely. You only go to the next level if you're chosen to go to the next level, and that means knowledge. So most Freemasons and secret society members are not involved in this scam. Only the few at the top who know what's going on. And so you have a situation with pyramids inside pyramids. It's like Russian dolls, one inside the other. So a bank is a pyramid, a transnational corporation is a pyramid, and a compartmentalized pyramid. The guy who goes to work in the bank in the morning, he's gone to earn his living so he can pay for the mortgage and look after his family. He's not trying to scam the world. But he doesn't know what he's part of. And so these fiercely compartmentalized pyramids mean that the bank is controlled by very few people. But that bank then goes into the next pyramid, the global banking system pyramid, and at the top of that, the same people control all the global banks. Same with the transnational corporations. They are individually a compartmentalized pyramid. They go into the transnational corporation global network, and at the top of that, all the transnational corporations are controlled by the same people, and they're the same people that control the banks. Same with the military, same with the secret societies, and same with the intelligence agencies, etc. Same with the political parties. And so what we've seen in this 20th century, just take the 20th century alone, is an incessant centralization of power in all areas of our lives. Why? Because all those institutions fuse into the same brotherhood, which is putting down those apparently unconnected areas of our lives, the same policy of centralization, all coordinated. This is the one-party state pyramid. Down here in the political parties at the bottom of the pyramid, you've got people who knock on your door and put the funny hats on at the conventions and political meetings and stuff. And they genuinely believe they're on different sides because they know no different. But as you go up these pyramids to the point that I'm talking about, to this brotherhood, these political parties that appear to be different in public fuse into the same leadership. So the people that supply or dictate who's going to run for president in the Democrats in America are the same people that dictate who's going to run for the Republicans. Same all over the world. It's one-party states, but we have to believe we have multi-party states and freedom and choice, otherwise we might rebel against not being free. We've got to be persuaded we are. And these political parties, in the end, are controlled by the same people. It's interesting, three of the key symbols that this brotherhood has used over these thousands of years is the lighted torch, the dove, and the red rose. And the three political parties in Britain are the Labour Party, Tony Blair's government, which is the red rose symbol, the Liberal Democrats, which is the dove, and the Conservatives, which is the lighted torch. Just a coincidence, nothing to worry about. We are told, and the media emphasizes this, and the leaders of politics, etc., walk the world stage as if they are at the peak of political decision-making in the world. When you look at the way it really works, the presidents, prime ministers, and heads of NATO, etc., are nowhere near the top of this global pyramid. They're some way down. And they are appointed and manipulated into power by those above them that control the banking system, the media, etc., which you need to have money and media support if you're going to make these positions. So presidents and prime ministers, why they stand there, as you know, someone once said the president of America is the most powerful man in the world. My goodness me, what a joke. They are administrators of an agenda which is being decided above them by people outside the public eye mostly. This is the health pyramid, another wonderful example of how this works. You've got the transnational drug corporations controlled by this global elite. They, the transnational drug corporations, created the World Health Organization within the United Nations. The World Health Organization, as a committee called Codex, which is devising regulations to make life very much more difficult for alternative healing and food supplements, etc. The Codex regulations come down and are introduced by European and national governments, go through the medical profession, and then are imposed on the people. And the alternative health methods, I say alternative, they've been around for thousands of years, the scalpel and the drug for 10 minutes, they are being squeezed out by this edifice of power. And because the drug companies control the World Health Organization and the doctors, etc., situations can arise like this. A few years ago, the World Health Organization announced there was going to be a measles epidemic the following year. And in Britain, the government spent taxpayers' money to produce very fear-based advertisements, black and white, with a big ominous voice saying, by the end of this year, one of these children on the picture will have died from measles. Oh my goodness, fear, the manipulation of fear again. As a result of that, there was a 99.99999% take-up all over Britain of that measles vaccine. A whole generation of children had that vaccine, and who supplied the vaccine? The transnational drug companies who, through the World Health Organization, had arranged for that announcement to be made. What happened? No measles epidemic. But then you say, what was going on? What about the epidemic? They say, well, there wasn't one because people were vaccinated. So the cycle goes on and on and on. Vaccination is one of the key ways that the human body and the human immune system is being undermined according to this agenda. Over the years, different groups of these secret societies have emerged for specific tasks. And because the agenda has a specific time scale, and across the millennium is the time of introduction, through this century, this agenda has been advanced quicker and quicker and quicker. Towards the end of the last century, and right at the start of this one, a secret society was created in Britain, not surprisingly, called the Round Table. It was headed up originally by a guy called Cecil Rhodes, who was one of the bloodline families that orchestrated the manipulation and takeover of southern Africa by Britain. Also, Rhodes scholarships came out of this guy, Cecil Rhodes. I think I mentioned those earlier, where the youngsters of the bloodlines around the world are picked up and given a Rhodes scholarship to Oxford University. This comes out of the same guy. Well, he died in 1902, and other people took over. And there were roundtable groups, interlocking, set up around the world. The key places were America and Britain. And when we had the First World War, the key people in the American War Administration were members of this round table, and the key people in the cabinet in Britain were members of this same round table. So they orchestrated the First World War, and afterwards, when they were deciding how the world would be redrawn as a result of the war, the very same members of the round table were appointed to the Versailles Peace Conference to decide how it would be set up and redrawn. Classic problem, reaction, solution. Create the problem, create the war, get the reaction, something must be done, and then offer the solution. At that Versailles Peace Conference, again in Paris, the cities and locations keep reoccurring, they had a meeting at the Hotel Majestic in Paris in 1919, these roundtable members, both sides of the Atlantic, and they started to orchestrate the creation of offshoot organizations around this central core that would push this agenda on through the 20th century. The first one created was the Royal Institute of International Affairs in 1920 in London, still going strong today, a major part of this network. In 1921, in America, came the Council on Foreign Relations, which is subordinate to the London Royal Institute of International Affairs. Since 1921, virtually every president and endless major positions in the administrations of both parties have been members of the Council on Foreign Relations. You cannot become an ambassador for the United States today without being a member of this private organization. In 1954 came the Bilderberg Group, set up at the Bilderberg Hotel in Oosterbeek, Holland. And this, like the Trilateral Commission that came in 1972-73, these organizations coordinate the same agenda between apparently unconnected areas of our lives. So, for instance, the people that attend and are members of these groups are the top people in the global military, global politics, global banking, global business, global media, etc. And so through these organizations, the same policy is coordinated. And I'll just give you one example of what I mean. The Bosnian War has been an example, magnificent example of all these elements that I'm talking about. First of all, it was problem, reaction, solution. You had the problem, the war, the reaction, something must be done, and the solution, a 60,000 strong world army under NATO control, which has advanced the agenda closer to the world army, which is the great goal of this agenda. People like Henry Kissinger, Kissinger Associates, and Lord Carrington, founding director of Kissinger Associates, were the key manipulators of the Bosnian War, among many others. So when you take that into account, and then you look at these organizations, and you look at the key peace negotiators in Bosnia, throughout that period of that war and conflict, some incredible coincidences start to unfold. When the war started, the European Union appointed the first peace negotiator, Lord Carrington. Lord Carrington, founding director of Kissinger Associates that orchestrated the war. Lord Carrington, chairman of the Bilderberg Group since 1991. President of the Royal Institute of International Affairs, Trilateral Commission member. When he failed to achieve peace in Bosnia and the war went on, Lord Carrington, chairman of the Bilderberg Group since 1991, President of the Royal Institute of International Affairs, Trilateral Commission member. When he failed to achieve peace in Bosnia and the war went on, along came another European Union peace negotiator, Lord David Owen, Bilderberg Group, Trilateral Commission, and he was replaced when the war went on by Carl Bildt, the Swedish Prime Minister, Bilderberg Group. Working with them through this same period were the United Nations appointed peace negotiators. The first one was Cyrus Vance, Bilderberg Group, Trilateral Commission, Council on Foreign Relations. He was replaced by a Norwegian, Thorvald Stoltenberg, Trilateral Commission, Bilderberg Group. The war went on. The horrors went on. The clamour, something must be done, got louder and louder, politically and in terms of the general public. It was time to play the sting. Onto the stage, first of all, came Jimmy Carter, an independent peace negotiator, former president. Jimmy Carter, first Trilateral Commission president of the United States, Council on Foreign Relations member. And then came the team that introduced the sting, the solution, the World Army. This was led by Richard Holbrooke, Bill Clinton's peace envoy. Richard Holbrooke, Bilderberg Group, Trilateral Commission, Council on Foreign Relations. He answered to the Secretary of State at the time in America, Warren Christopher, Trilateral Commission, Council on Foreign Relations, who worked with William Perry, the Defense Secretary at the time, Bilderberg Group, and they answered to the President, Bill Clinton, Bilderberg Group, Trilateral Commission, Council on Foreign Relations, who answered to the unelected David Rockefeller and Henry Kissinger, leading executives of the Bilderberg Group, Trilateral Commission, Council on Foreign Relations. The first head of the World Army appointed in Bosnia was Admiral Leighton Smith, Council on Foreign Relations. And the ambassador in the former Yugoslavia through this period was Warren Zimmerman, Council on Foreign Relations. Just a coincidence, nothing to worry about. But unless you do this research, you think all these people are independent, when actually they're all connected. This roundtable network also accounts for the coordination of the media, because if you look at the 3 television networks in America, NBC, ABC, CBS, if you look at the Los Angeles Times, the New York Times, the Washington Post, the Wall Street Journal, etc., all over the world, you're looking at the people who control those organizations being members of this same roundtable network. Washington Post, Katharine Graham, Bilderberg Group, Trilateral Commission, Council on Foreign Relations, and so it goes on. So you have a coordinated policy, a coordinated agenda through all these different areas of our lives, including the media, which controls how that agenda and those events that you're creating are actually reported to the people. Complete stitch-up, but it doesn't have to be. It depends on us giving our power away and watching the Price is Right instead of focusing on what's going on in the world and taking responsibility for it so it ceases to happen. Just to finish the sequence, this is the administration of a Democrat, said on his election form, Jimmy Carter, Trilateral Commission member, also Council on Foreign Relations. Democrats, and his administrations, here's CFR, TC, Trilateral Commission, Council on Foreign Relations. This is more Jimmy Carter, more of the same organizations coordinating policy through this apparently elected administration. So then you get to 1980 and you think, oh, well, I'm fed up with them Democrats, and of course I'm in a democracy, and so therefore I can choose someone different because I want to change the policy, you know, and it's great being in the land of the free and all that. And so you choose Ronald Reagan. His chief advisors up there were David Rockefeller and Henry Kissinger, 2 of the great brotherhood manipulators of the 20th century. And then again, the names change in these various positions, but the coordinating bodies do not. CFR, TC, everywhere. More Ronald Reagan. Ronald Reagan was a non-member, but he didn't have to be, did he, Ron? He read the autocue, did as he was told, like they all do. But he was a member of other secret groups and, of course, Bohemian Grove, as we saw earlier. Again, here you have the ambassadors, the Congress, the State Department, CFR, TC. So then you move on to George Bush. George Bush, I would refer you to And the Truth Shall Set You Free and The Biggest Secret, and I will say no more about George Bush. So there again, another administration, different names, same coordinating bodies. More George Bush, same again. So then you get to, what is it, 1992, and you say, well, I'm fed up with them Republicans. They've had all these terms, and you know, with Reagan and Bush, and I think we ought to have a change. And so along comes Slick Will from the Windsor bloodline from Arkansas, and he starts saying that he stands for change, and I stand for change, and vote for me, we need change. That was his mantra throughout that election. Well, let's see how the change took place. Here's Bill, member of all of them, got the full set, and there again, different names. We're Democrat now, because it says so. Same coordinating body, Bill Clinton administration again, same coordinating bodies. So we've come a long way in these hours so far, from the ancient world to the present day, and we have seen unfold, and I have scratched the surface here. I've just scratched the surface of the information that's available and the supporting evidence that's available because of time. But we've come from the ancient world and seen these bloodlines expand their power to the point now where they control the planet. We're also at a point of enormous change as this 26,000-year cycle comes to an end of the solar system going round the galactic sun. Always a time of tremendous change. We're starting to see it happen. People are waking up. People are starting to look at this information for the first time. And indeed, this energy of change is lifting the veil on all this for the first time in thousands of years. We're blinking into the light of what's been going on behind our backs, behind the movie screen all this time. And I repeat, this can only happen because we allow it to happen and we play a part in it happening. It's not that this group have more power than the rest of the population, nonsense. It is the rest of the population give their power to this group day after day after day. It's because we allow ourselves to be divided and ruled, because in our stunning self-righteousness, we think if we believe something, everyone else must believe it or we're wrong. It's a time to grow up. It's a time to go from spiritual childhood to spiritual adulthood very, very quickly in the time that we have available as this change takes place. And in the final video in the series, I'm going to look at what changes are taking place and who we really are. The information above all else, above all this, that this brotherhood and these bloodlines have been desperate to stop us understanding all this time. Who we are, the nature of life, and the fact there's no one on this planet that's ordinary, there's no one in this creation that's ordinary. There's just billions who've been manipulated to think they are, so we become a doddle to manipulate and control. That time is over, and we'll see that in the final video in this series. For now, thank you very much. Well, it's many hours since I started talking here about this long story from the ancient world. And it's appropriate we finish in this final section on what we can do about it and how we can bring this manipulation to an end and bring freedom, true freedom, to this planet for the first time in literally thousands of years. And therefore, it's hardly surprising that it's this information that I'm going to be talking about now that has been most suppressed and most fiercely suppressed of all. Because if we realize who we really are and the nature of our true power to control our own destiny and control the direction of our lives, then the ability of a few to control the many becomes impossible. This is why we've had such emphasis over these thousands of years on creating religions and other prisons of the mind which have divorced us and kept us apart from the knowledge that would set us free. And we really come to another opposame, religion and science. As I document in my books, the same secret societies that created religion, all of them, were the same that created what we call science, this idea, excuse me if I insult your intelligence, that this world is all there is and we come from oblivion, and after a period in awakened consciousness of a few seconds or 100 years, we go back to oblivion. Get letters after your name for coming up for that, you know, it's amazing. And a big salary. Now these two things appear to be opposites. One saying God and all this stuff, and you must do what God says. And this one saying there is no God, and it's kind of, you're just a cosmic accident, darling. They have many things in common. They have one key thing in common. They're both saying that control of our lives is not here, it's out here somewhere. What science is saying is always just a random accident, mate. Just your luck. And over here in religion, it's saying, well, yeah, your destiny is controlled by whether you serve and do what God says. Oh, by the way, me and my long frock and nice collar, I know what God wants, so do what I tell you and you'll be fine, darling. And so religion was used for so long, and still is used massively, to control people and shut their minds off from the reality of who they are and the nature of their true power, life itself indeed. And when, particularly during the last couple of centuries, people began in increasing numbers not to buy that little scam, along came this world is all there is science to pick them up. And the idea of both, and indeed the creators of both, were high initiates of the secret society and mystery school network who knew that both versions of life were a load of old crap. If we don't buy either, we can see what they're trying to keep us from. We can see what they're trying to keep us from. We are given the choice of being controlled by God or being basically a cosmic accident, okay? What we are not given the choice to see from early in our lives, unless we have enlightened parents, is that we are not a physical body and we are not just an entity that lives in a physical world. We are everything that exists. Increasingly open-minded science, and my goodness me, it's about time we had some of that, is starting to confirm what mystics and people that talk about this have been saying for thousands of years. That everything that exists in the whole of creation, in this dimension and others, is the same energy in different states of being. And the vibrational state of that energy decides what that energy will manifest as. And therefore, we are not the physical body. That is our genetic spacesuit through which we experience this world. What we are is multidimensional consciousness that animates that body. And the question is, how much of that consciousness are we going to access? A little bit or massive amounts of it? We have a connection between our spiritual energy self and our physical self, which is called the chakra system. It comes from a Sanskrit word meaning wheels of light, and the Sanskrit language comes from the Aryan race that came out of the Caucasus Mountains. You know the score by now. Now, what these chakra vortexes do, and there's 7 main ones but many others, is that they interpenetrate our levels of being. So we have a mental level, which is an energy field. It's a frequency range. That's our rational thought, as they call it. We have an emotional level, which is another frequency range. We have a spiritual level, which is the higher dimensions of ourselves. And these levels are interpenetrated by these chakra vortexes, these wheels of light. And therefore, an imbalance on one level is, through this vortex system, transferred to other levels. This is why when we get very emotionally stressed, the first thing that stops happening is we stop thinking straight. We stop thinking straight because the imbalance on the emotional level has been transferred to the mental level, and bang, 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 we go. Now, if this imbalance goes on, this emotional imbalance, it's transferred eventually to the lowest level of this system, which is the physical level. And it manifests in the physical body as a chemical reaction. Now, it's at this point that modern medicine comes in with its drugs and scalpels at the point of the chemical reaction. Therefore, it is treating the symptom of the energy imbalance, the emotional imbalance, not the cause. And I remember where I lived on the Isle of Wight, a little island off the south coast of England, the doctor's practice there sent out a letter to everybody who was in that practice, the patients and stuff. And it kind of encapsulated the whole thing magnificently. It said, patients are reminded that appointments with the doctor are for 5 minutes only, and this is not a time to discuss your other problems. What has been so massively missed is there are other problems creating the emotional imbalance and distress that are causing the physical illness. So if you look at the human entity as a whole, you're looking at a very different vision of who we are and health and every other aspect of life than if you think that we're just a physical body. And these chakra vortexes are drawing in, particularly what they call the base chakra, vast amounts of energy which we can create with in ways that I'll come to in a second. The more these chakra vortexes are closed down, the less energy they're drawing in, the less energy we have to work with and create with. And so from this high level of knowledge that I've been talking about over thousands of years, at the peak of this brotherhood network, they understand these things. And so much of the manipulation of human emotion and human thinking, human perception and human attitudes has been designed to close these vortexes down so we access a fraction of multidimensional infinity, this infinite mind that we're part of. There was an American comedian called Bill Hicks, great guy, died in 1994, who summed up this whole concept of life I'm talking about in this way, because he was a very bright man. He said, matter is merely energy condensed to a slow vibration. We're all one consciousness experiencing itself subjectively. There's no such thing as death, life is just a dream, and we are the imagination of ourselves. And that's the key. What we imagine ourselves to be is what we physically create. So if we can be manipulated to imagine ourselves as ordinary, then we'll create ordinary lives. When the penny drops that we are all extraordinary, we live extraordinary lives, and this manipulation is over. We're like droplets of water in an ocean of consciousness. We're individual to an extent, just like droplets of water are individual. You can hold one in your hand. But those droplets together make up the ocean. Without the droplets, there is no ocean. It's the same with this infinite energy mind we call creation, God, whatever you want to call it Ethel, I'm not bothered. We are not part of that infinity. We are that infinity, if we open ourselves up to reconnect with it. And this is where we come back to the eggshell. Because most people are manipulated through fear and sense of limitation to shut off from that infinity and all its infinite wisdom, love, understanding that is available to be tapped any time. Because it's us. Wherever you stand in infinity, you are at the center of infinity. So everything that exists is everything that exists. I am everything that exists. So are you. The more you realize that, the more you open up to the full infinity of who you are. Your life transformed. Your vision of yourself is transformed. Your vision of everything is transformed. The more you see yourself as just an individual, ordinary little man and woman in the street, I got no power, mate, what can I do? Once you do that, you are shutting yourself off from the infinity of who you are, and you become a fraction of what you are. And then you are able to be controlled, but only then. Which is why this understanding has been so suppressed. That's where most people live their lives. In a sense of, I can't, mate, I could never, mate, all the best things in life happen to someone else, mate, or what can I do? And when we're there, piece of cake, manipulator in one hand while having a cup of tea in another. When we're here, we're a manipulator's nightmare, breaking the eggshell, breaking the sense of limitation, breaking the sense of fear, the fear of what other people think of us. How many people watching this video now would love to say something, but they think, oh, God, what will my mother say? Oh, what will they think of me? Oh, you'd love to do something in your life, and you say, oh, well, what will they think? I couldn't give a damn what they think. They have a right to think what they like, but so do you and so do I. We forgot that. And once we start believing that because people are different to us, they must be wrong, then we're in a situation where whoever sets the norms in society runs the world. Because we police each other, like I said right at the start of this journey we've both been on, and all been on in the last few hours. Cracking the eggshell, stepping out of the fear of what other people think of us, being who we are, speaking our truth, living our uniqueness. That is the revolution. It's not guns and bombs and meeting violence with violence and meeting anger with anger. What's the point? You get twice the anger, twice the violence. My goodness me, we've moved on, haven't we? The way out of this is the ultimate revolution. It's to be who we are and not what someone else tells us we should be. It's interesting. If you stood in front of a mirror, or not even in front of a mirror, anywhere, and you got a baseball bat, and you started smacking yourself around the head with it, people would call the guys in white coats, wouldn't they? Crikey, get him away. And yet that's what we're doing all the time. When we express that violence to another human being, or to an animal, or to anything, we're actually expressing it to ourselves, because that is us. We are all each other, because we are all this infinite mind. And because we've lost sight of the fact that we are everything, and what we are inside is what we externally create, we go round, because of the manipulation, we're like walking, talking movie projectors. Let me put it this way. Our inner self, our state of being, our attitudes are resonating us to a certain vibrational frequency. You change your attitudes, the frequency changes. Hate has a certain frequency, and when we feel hate, we resonate the energy around us, that is us, to the hate frequency. We feel love, we resonate it to a different frequency. This energy that we put out with this vibrational code within it, created by our thoughts and attitudes, then draws towards it a reflection of itself. Other energy fields, people, places, ways of life, experiences that sync with what we're putting out. Therefore, what we are in here, we externally create. And I came across this symbol here. There's some esoteric symbols and that involved in there, but ignore all them. I'm just looking at the basic concept, which is of a reflection. There was a guy, a writer called Longfellow, I think it was Longfellow who wrote this, anyway, some tall chap. And he wrote a story about how someone drowned thrashing in the water, fighting with their own reflection. He wrote a story about how someone drowned thrashing in the water, fighting with their own reflection. And again, if you saw someone next to the river doing that, you'd call the white coats. They'd be on call all day, wouldn't they? But that's what we do, all of us, all the time. We seek to change what we've created by thrashing at the reflection instead of looking at what's creating it. So when things are happening in our lives we don't like, and we're drawing people into our lives we don't like, and we're drawing experiences we don't like, instead of saying, why am I drawing these in? What is it about me that's creating this? What is it I'm putting out that's drawing this reflection in that I don't like? This pain in the arse is giving me a hard time. Instead of taking that power back and responsibility for what we create in our lives, we look out there for it. Boom, boom, boom. And we're encouraged to. And so we're in a situation where we're looking at the reflection, trying to change what's going on, when we need to change what is being reflected. You know, if you're standing next to a river and you see a reflection of yourself and you don't like it very much, you can throw stones at it, you can cuss it, you can kick it, you can jump in and thrash around. All that external thing, which we do in our lives all the time. You're responsible, it's your fault, I'm in this position, out there, out there, out there, externalizing responsibility. But once all that thrashing around is finished in the river, and once you've thrown all those stones in, everything settles down again, and exactly the same reflection is being reflected as was before, because the reflection is merely, literally, a mirror of what is being reflected. We change inside, we change out here. This is the thing that we've been pressured, encouraged not to understand. Evolution's very, very simple. Very simple. Goes in this sequence. Experience, learn from the experience, evolve as a result of the experience. If at stage one, we're putting out energy, reflecting our state of being, and we draw in a certain experience as a result, person, place, whatever. If at the point where we don't like the experience, we are blaming everyone else out here. It's your fault, it was Ethel in 1963, it was me mother, it's me colour, it's me sexuality. What is pulling that experience in is not changing, because we're blaming everyone else for it. So what happens is, because what's going out hasn't changed, what comes back doesn't change, and we hit these cycles in our lives, and we've all had them, and all still have them, where the same things keep getting repeated. We pull in the same type of person to have a relationship with. We pull in the same situation in work. Nothing ever works in our lives. And yet, when you look at that, what that is evolutionary, just running on the spot. We're not moving, because we're not changing what's creating what we don't like.